Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and it's time for the Unified Mind set review. Now we don't have the full card list just yet, but this is pretty much a speculative review, looking at the cards that make up the 3 Japanese sets that all merge together to make our Unified Mind set. This is of course the big one, it is the Worlds set, so it's all going to be post-rotation that we start looking at and talking about how we are going to be able to function and what decks are strong coming out of this set as we go through. So, as always, we have the Omnipoke rating system. You can see here, we've got a 5-star rating system. Check out the top right corner if you want to see the quick breakdown, the quick sort of analysis that we have of the card. It's based on current standard format with some consideration to expanded. Really not much, to be honest. But yeah, quick run through. 1-star, something that's got something of interest but is unlikely to see play. 2-star, it has potential, may see experimentation, doesn't have many obvious applications. 3-star cards where things start getting more interesting. A promising card which could be included in current decks that we already know about, or looks to have a big part in a new archetype that's below top tier. 4 stars are pretty impressive stuff. They will certainly see play and will have a notable impact on newer decks or when adapting current archetypes. And then the 5 stars are the ones you absolutely have to keep an eye on. They will be impacting the meta. There will be key players in top tier archetypes, or there'll be a card which will see play across a number of decks as a staple. So we definitely want to keep your eye on those 5 stars. The community have all chipped in as well, which is fantastic. I'm bringing back the community majority ratings, and I'm also adding in the community average ratings as well. We've now had over 390 responses from this set review, so really fantastic stuff. And it's meant that we have enough data now to make reasonable averages to also help the stats. So it's not only my opinion that you have to listen to, you can also take a look at the community average rating, which will be on top, and then the majority rating on the bottom. So essentially what I mean by majority is if the majority of people in this case said blue strategy, you can see the majority here, 40.5% said 3 stars, so the majority is a 3-star, whereas the average is taking the whole pie and averaging out that score to a 2.7. So it gives you both sides of the spectrum as well, so you can really see where people's minds are when they're looking at these cards. Sometimes something can have a very high average score, even though it may be like a lower majority rating, because people, haven't decided whether it's a 4 or a 3 or whatever. But then similarly, you could see if it's between a 3 and a 2 by the majority of people, and a handful of people rate a card a 1-star. So you can see sort of where people's minds are by adding in this extra average as well, which is pretty cool. So with that being said, let's kick off the review, starting with the supporter cards. And we are actually going to kick off with Blue Strategy. It's a new supporter that says, when your turn is over, draw cards from your deck until you have 8 cards in your hand. So this is kind of reminiscent of the likes of Tropical Beach and Steven's Resolve. Of course, Blue's strategy does not end your turn when you use him. You can use him at any time during your turn, then play out a bunch of cards to lower your hand size, or you could play a Blue strategy, then Dene and get a fresh hand, and then reload that hand, and then Blues to top yourself up at the end of the turn. So it's not the same as Tropical Beach or Stevens, because they are literally like the last action you will make. But the principle is still there, where you're not getting any value for this turn. You're helping you get a fresh hand for next turn. And there aren't really many decks that I can foresee having the luxury of doing that. Most of the time, you want to find basics on turn 1. You want to get attaching to your main attackers, all that good stuff. And using your supporter slot in Blues means that you're not getting any hand advantage on that turn, and straight away you start falling behind. Maybe there are a couple exceptions. It can be nice alongside like Lieutenant Surge in a Psyduck Slowpoke deck, because the whole idea around Slowduck is that you're going to use things like Misties to get lots of supporters in hand, but then, so your hand size will be large, but then you will, from there, dump all your supporters from your hand. So if you're able to use Blue's strategy as your last supporter that turn, not only will you like take a big knockout or whatever with your Psyduck that turn, but the Blues could help you top up more cards as well. So that's a pretty interesting thing to note. Also, there's maybe an argument that you can get like some rare candy shenanigans going on for stage 2 decks, but I would argue that you probably want to just guarantee getting your basics down on turn 1 anyway. So you'd be looking more towards Elms or Fan Clubs or just Lily, stuff like that, because not getting advantage on those opening turns is going to be really punishing. So I'm going to rate this card just a 1-star. I think it is too narrow to be that powerful. I think the only reason why this may see play is is if you are playing, you know, like 4 Cherish Ball, 2 Dedenne, and you're accepting that you will Dedenne every single turn 1 of the game, if you can, so that you can, you know, still draw cards on turn 1 and then blues to help you set up for an Omega turn 2 as well. Because let's face it, drawing up to 8 cards can be immense value. We've seen what it's like with Lily, and this can be at any turn in the game, but you would have to have a very specific deck that doesn't need cards on certain turns, and that's a pretty awkward thing to ask, I would imagine. Next up, we have Chandler. It's a spiritual reprint of Pokemon Ranger. It's a little bit different. Ranger does each player's Pokemon, each player's and each player's Pokemon, whereas Chandler just says remove all effects of attacks on you and your Pokemon. So if there are any existing effects on your opponent or whatever, it doesn't get affected this time. It's the ones that are on you. So there's a handful coming out from this set, actually, which may see Chandler as like a necessary addition. That's things like the Latios GX, the Cryogonal, and the Behaim. The 2 non-GXs, they are item locking, and the Latios is an annoying wall for you to get through if you are a tag team Pokemon. So if you don't want to play answers physically in Pokemon form for things like Latios or things like Zygarde GX, stuff like that, you could add in Chandler to your list so you can remove those effects and still hit through them, which is interesting. It could also be nice against Dawnwings, which is a much more powerful effect now that we have lost Guzma through rotation. So if you are concerned about any of those style of attacks, you could have Chandler in here to simply remove those effects. There's also the small upside that if you are one of these decks that has attackers such as Zeraora, Reshizard, Buzzmosa, where they have negative drawbacks, Plasma Fists, Flare Strike, and Elegant Soul all have these bad drawbacks. So if you did that attack last turn, then it comes into your next turn and your Pokemon is still in the active and hasn't been knocked out, you could Channeler and remove those effects. So the Plasma Fists not allowing you to attack next turn, you can undo that and then hit into the active again. So the Channeler has like that sort of twofold approach where it can help you out if you have your own sort of downside attacks, and it can help out against some very annoying Pokemon. But overall, it doesn't draw cards. It's very situational. A lot of the time, you can just have non-GX attackers or whatever to get through the likes of Latios' attack and whatnot. So I think it's still kind of too narrow. We only ever saw Pokemon Ranger as like a one-off, and that was in a time where we had Versus Seeker as well to reuse it to help us out a lot against Seismitoad and to help us out more so against Greninja as well. That Shadow Stitching was very annoying for decks. So I think there are less targets to use on Chandler than there were back when Pokemon Ranger saw play, and it's like a one-use effect now without Versus Seeker or whatever. Like, you could argue Palpad and stuff, but yeah, I think the Chandler is just not going to see a whole lot of play overall. Next up, we have Coach Trainer. It allows you to draw 2 cards, but if you have an active tag team Pokemon, you draw 2 additional cards. So it's a total of draw 4. It's very similar to, a Mary's Request from way back when, but also similar to How, really. It's a How +1 in that situation where you are possibly a quad tag team deck, or if you are just, even if you're not a quad deck, if you're playing like Jirachis and whatnot, and you're trying to dig deeper into the build, you can have a Coach Trainer to draw 4 flats. So if you're getting into big hand sizes, you don't want to play Lily, or you're playing combination pieces, like if you're trying to dig towards double custom catcher or something like that, the Coach Trainer lets you dig deeper into the deck rather than having potential shuffle draw from Cynthia, or having like a couple card draw from Lily if you're trying to hold on to certain pieces. So that's the real selling point of this card, but I think there are just too many disadvantages. If you don't have your tag team active, for example, you're only drawing 2, and that is really pathetic. It's a really sour state of affairs to do that. Also, there are just plenty of situations where you want to stack your tag team up on the bench, and then you don't want it to be, if it's not ready to attack or whatever, you can just power him up, and then the Coach Trainer's not really getting much value. So I think overall, keep looking out for things like Ericas or Bills, or just playing Pokegears as your additional supporters. Coach Trainer could end up being that 9th or 10th supporter you add into a heavy tag team focused deck, but overall I think there are a lot of downsides to this card, and usually the upside of drawing 4 isn't all that great, so I think it's not worth the effort, to be honest. We then have Grimsley. He's an interesting supporter that says move up to 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of your opponent's Pokemon. So it's the Cursed Eyes Absol ability now in supporter form. Absol was kind of played as a tech basic here and there. It was played in Mega Ordino for Worlds, actually, the Worlds winning list, and a few other things throughout the ages. But in a supporter form, once again, you're not drawing cards. It is very slow to use a Grimsley. And I think we have the better option of Koga's Trap now if you need to, get an extra damage counter on things for knockouts. For example, a Reshizard with a Koga can knock out a Pikarom. Now that we no longer have Kukui has rotated. We are looking for some of these alternatives to be able to finish off things. But I think Koga's is probably much stronger than Grimsley. We already have a few things that can do additional counters as well. Things like Spell Tag and Giratina. Psychic decks are some of the best at having these like counter shenanigans going on. And I think those will be superior to Grimsley overall because you're still able to set up and draw cards and whatnot. And Grimsley is kind of a situational card that you can't always like access on the right turn. So although there are plenty of situations where you're like overkilling something on like a 2-shot scenario, I think overall it's just too slow to get a whole lot of value, especially when we have, like both Lele's, Spell Tag, Giratina, all these other options for placing counters here and there on your opponent's stuff to set up damage. I don't think we're necessarily like calling out for a card like this. So I don't think it's I don't think it's better than any of the other options that we have right now. Hapu is a really interesting supporter card. I'm a big fan of Sage's Training from way back when. This is Sage's Training +1. You are able to look at an additional card, but you also have the additional quote-unquote drawback of discarding an extra card. So you look at the top 6, you keep 2, 4 go to the discard pile. Now, some people will think about this as like you dig deep into the deck. It's almost like a sycamore. If you're digging for certain specific cards, you're looking at 6 cards to try and find specific pieces. That could be anything from rare candies to custom catchers to just more basics and whatever else. Like, it is a very versatile supporter card. If you think about when you used to play Sycamore way back when, like, a lot of the time on that turn, you were looking for 1 or 2 key cards to keep you in the game. And Happy will help you do that. It will dig deep and try and get those pieces out of the deck. So in terms of raw digging potential, it sees a lot of cards, which is good. But then there's the additional, upside of sometimes discarding cards that help you out. Think about things like Malamar decks. Think about Rotom, which is possibly less of a meme now that Muck has finally left the format. And having Hapu at your side really accelerates your own win condition of dumping tools whilst also picking out other things that help you draw cards or discard more tool cards. So that's great. Anything with charging up could consider this, be it Blacephalon GX, be it the new Dark Toolbox decks that also run lines of Naganadel for charging up. Obviously, there are things like Pikarom, which likes having Lightning in the discard pile. Mew and Mewtwo Tag Team GX, they love having an array of Pokemon in the discard pile for you to steal attacks from, which can be very helpful. And Zygarde as well, with that Cell Connector, even the new Zygarde coming out, attaches energy from the discard pile. So Hapu has this great discard synergy that we're really, I think, lacking right now. Since Ultra Ball is now rotating, that was one of the core cards we had for many of these decks to have discard synergy. Now we're left with the likes of Viridian Forest, Mysterious Treasure for some of these decks. But then Hapu comes in to sort of fill that void of having discard, which is really nice. So I think Hapu is between a 3 and a 4-star. I was pretty close to putting this a 4-star. I think recently it's not made it into my Mali decks. It's not made it into my Pikarom, but it's still definitely being tested in my Dark decks, in my Mewtwo decks, and it's like a staple in Rotom as well. So I think Hapu is just one of these consideration cards. Not often you will play 4 of them unless you're very, very, very focused on heavy discarding, but having 2 Hapus in your deck, I think, can sometimes definitely outweigh, like that 4th Lily or something like that. Or even if you already have 4 Lily, 4 Cynthia, a couple Hapus on top can definitely help consistency, whilst also giving you a bit of discarding synergy. My biggest downside of this card is that Custom Catcher is such an integral piece of our format post-rotation, because it's our best means of gusting, unless you're a fire deck. And there will be moments where you Hapu, and there's cards you need to take, and then Custom Catchers end up finding their way to the discard pile, and you're not able to gust 2 times in a game, and that gets very scary. That's the biggest downside of Hapu. That's the reason why I'm hesitant to put it in high counts in a lot of decks, but overall its digging potential is still very, very solid, and I'm a big fan of this card. Misty's Request is pretty much like a spiritual reprint of Scott, but with a bit less versatility. It allows you to search your deck for up to 3 supporter cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Scott allowed you to get any stadiums as well, which was slightly stronger. But you can see why they just did it at stadiums this time around, because now we have Prism Stars and stuff, so that could have been a bit busted otherwise. But now it just gets you a combination of supporters. Obviously, there's the fun Slow Duck deck that can be built around this card, but you can also think about a few other synergies here and there. You got to think about those hat ladies. That's also got big meme potential. People love doing that. They used to play Steven's Resolve to try and do things like that. Misty's can be a very similar role for you, to assemble the hat ladies, to get that big energy acceleration swing, to get, you know, whatever target you want, be it Turbo Ray or Turbo Guardi Sylveon or whatever else you want to commit to. Misty can help you get there, which is also pretty cool. There's another few cards you could consider, getting things like Lance Prism Star for some big value, getting Cyrus Prism Star as well for disruption. There's a few key one-off supporters that you could dig out of your deck for the right moment with Misty's, but of course it's sort of laying a battle plan for next turn once again. So it's very similar. The same sort of spiel I gave for blue strategy has to be applied to Misty's as well. You're spending your turn digging for cards that can't help you on this turn. They're more for a setup for later, and that is always a little bit detrimental. But I think this is obviously a 4-of core card in the Slow Duck deck, because it represents sometimes 160 damage in one card. Because you play the Misties, get yourself 120 damage worth of supporters, then you can use a Mermaid's Call and get back that Misty. So using one supporter for turn essentially gets you 160 damage for your Slow Duck that turn, and that's a very scary prospect. So I ultimately think Slow Duck is a bit of a meme deck. Let me tell you, I was one of the first to try this deck. I was definitely wanting to experiment with it, and I've had a lot of fun doing so, but I think just not having Gust in your deck alone makes Slow Duck like a lot worse, and having to commit, you know, like 25 plus supporters into your deck does eat up a lot of space. So as much as I like the deck and will be playing it on stream and whatnot all the time, I do think it's a little bit below the bar, and that's why Misty's isn't at a higher rating, but it is like a core 4-of in that deck. It's an all-star for that deck for sure. Pokemaniac's a very interesting supporter. It really, really reminds me of Winona. Winona was a supporter back from Roaring Skies. It allowed you to get 3 colorless Pokemon and put them into your hand. Pokemaniac is very similar. You search your deck for 3 Pokemon, all with a retreat cost of 4 exactly, and then put them into your hand. So I'll talk about Winona once again, because this card, like in a vacuum, seems really, really, really strong. You could completely build around Winona if there are good colorless type Pokemon, and you know there never really was. There was Mega Rayquaza that would sometimes like play a thin line of this just because you had like Compressor versus Seeker engines, but usually there weren't enough colorless Pokemon to really support something like Winona. It feels very similar for Pokemaniac right now. There aren't enough decks that can just take advantage of him. His tutoring effect for very specific Pokemon is very powerful. It's just right now we don't have enough powerful Pokemon with a 4 retreat cost that you want to like dig out. Looking at the tag teams like Eevee, Snorlax, and Celesaur, you know, we have Cherish Ball for this anyway, so you don't need the Pokemaniac that turn. And then we just have some other like meme decks. There's a Lickitung from the set. I'm not even going to be talking about the Lickitung in too much detail today, because I think it's a below the bar card, but you know, it's something that you could use with Pokemaniac. There's the Rhyperior line, which all can have 4 retreat costs. There's, you know, Onyxes, Arcanines. There's also like a camera up from this set that you could look into, but nothing too impressive for him to use. But this card becomes amazing if ever there is some sort of evolution deck that all has a 4 retreat cost. So he becomes like an amazing card if a basic plus stage 1 and plus stage 2, similar to the Rhyperior line. If there's like an evolution line like that ends up seeing play, Pokemaniac becomes amazing. It's just so narrow right now that there's no real candidates for him to be abused with. Next up, we have Cherish Ball. As you can see, the community all agree with me on this one. This is an absolute staple card for the future. This card is magnificent. Cherish Ball allows you to search your deck for a Pokemon GX, reveal it and put it into your hand, then you shuffle your deck. So let me just say, GXs are very, very powerful post-rotation. They, simply because they have 4 Cherish Ball, they have a lot more consistency over non-GX decks, because not only can it get you into your main attacker with Cherish Ball immediately for no cost at all, you are also able to grab Dedenne. And Dedenne is going to be a much more important card post-rotation. In many of my decks, even non-GX focused decks, I am playing a couple copies of Dedenne, because it just nets you so many cards. And Cherish Ball giving you easy access to draw 6 more cards. It's like playing, you know, if you play 2 Dedenne for Cherish Ball, it's like you're playing 6 extra supporter outs to draw 6 cards. Whilst also the Cherish Ball then becomes all your outs to Pokemon. It's so versatile, so strong, so integral to our format that it's going to be in every GX deck. Literally every GX deck will play Cherish Ball, and probably as a 4-of alongside 1 or 2 Dedenes as well. I think it's just so core, so powerful, it's just obviously good. You can see a handful of examples on the far right of the Pokemon that would like to abuse this. But yeah, Cherish Ball is just absolutely incredible. Mainly because you can get your attackers, but also draw 6 off of Dedenne as well. So it gets you out of so many bad spots. It's just so crucial. Next up, we have Great Potion. This is an interesting card, kind of similar to old Fairy Drop. It used to be Pokemon that has a Fairy on it. Now it's an active GX Pokemon as the only target that you can heal off of. But healing for 50, which is pretty okay. Think about things like Great Potion, or sorry, Super Potion. That used to be a heal 60, but you had to discard an energy card. Now, for no cost, you just heal 50 damage. This could be pretty important. If you look at the bottom row of cards, they may look a little bit random, but essentially what I'm saying is they all hit like 120, basically. Or in Aegislash's case, it's 130, right? But it's one of those things where if you're a tag team deck, you could heal out of 2-shot range from some of these 2-shot decks. So Great Potion could be very nice. We've seen Mixed Herbs be popular in Reshizard recently. And Great Potion could end up filling that slot over them, especially if people move away from Green's exploration-based builds. I think compared to Mixed Herbs, they do line up relatively favorably. Obviously, the Great Potion is always like more usable than Mixed Herbs. You only need 1 in your hand to get that healing effect. And also, if you use 2 Great Potion in a turn, you effectively heal 10 more damage than the Mixed Herbs. Obviously, Mixed Herbs does have that small advantage of removing status conditions as well, which can help out against, confusion from Cephalon or from Nihilego or stuff like that, or random paralysis from like Raichu decks that are in Pikarom builds. So, I mean, Mixed Herbs isn't like completely gone now that Great Potion is out. But they definitely are comparable and interchangeable, really. I think one of the biggest things about Great Potion is its interaction with Tina Chomp Tag Team. Tina Chomp is trying to use Calamitous Slash for big one-hit KOs on Tag Team Pokemon, but it requires your opponent to have some amount of damage on them. And looking at linear attack, it does 40 damage. There's things like Giratina, there's things like Spell Tag. They're literally just going to try and pepper you up a tiny bit and then one-shot you with a Calamitous Slash. That is the whole game plan of the Tina Chomp Tag Team builds of Malamar going forwards. So having Great Potions in your list can really improve that matchup, because if, you bring up your attacker that they've Giratinaed onto or something with Distortion Door, you can use Great Potion on that turn. Even healing that 10 effectively pushes them way out of range from taking a knockout against you. So I think if you're concerned about Tina Chomp, Great Potion's a great addition. Even as like a one-of in Pikarom, if you're playing a high Vulcan account, you can get away with it. If you're playing Green's Exploration, once again, you can get away with having Great Potion in here. If you're Jirachi-based, there are so many reasons why it's easy to find Great Potion when you need it, that I think if you're worried about 2-shot decks and you're worried about Tina Chomp, Great Potion could be a really nice addition to your deck. So I only give it 3 stars for its versatility. It does kind of depend on which Malamar deck comes out on top. I'm still debating which one's the strongest. I do think Tina Chomp is definitely strong, but, kind of counterable by the Great Potion. And also, I think 2-hit KO decks are kind of weak in this format, but there are some exceptions out there. So if you are respecting those 2-shot decks and the Tina Chomp, Great Potions for you. But at the moment, I'm just going to keep it as a 3 as like a tech option, really. Next up, we have Reset Stamp. Again, a clear majority of us all agree that this is a 5-star card. It's the spiritual reprint of N. It's finally some hand disruption for our opponent once they start flying ahead on prize cards. We have a comeback mechanic once again in the game, and I'm absolutely ecstatic to see it. Your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck, then your opponent draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. I've done an entire video on Reset Stamp and why I love it so much, so I'm not going to go on about it all over again, but just bear in mind that we have comeback mechanics now in the game, and we can really influence our opponent's hand very easily now with this item card, which is phenomenal. It may incentivize us to have these sorts of engines that can firstly play around your opponent reset stamping you, but also giving us good access to Reset Stamp on the turn that we need it. So Stellar Wish, Volkner, Greens, having any sort of draw from Salazzle or Persian, or the new Dragon Neganadel GX. These are all, much stronger cards in a format where your opponent can Reset Stamp you down to 1 or 2 cards. Because you need to have a way to come back into the game. You need to have either a deck that can win like on board already, or you can have some draw potential to get yourself out of a rut. after your opponent hits you with a reset stamp. So it really is going to be nice for, you know, some slower decks to have a comeback mechanic and slow down these very aggressive turbo decks that just try and build a big board and send an attacker into you turn by turn by turn and just win a race. Reset Stamp is there to make life more difficult for them and make them plan a little bit more ahead about their knockouts. So I think this card is overall amazing for the game, and it sort of directs us towards having our own draw engines in decks. Like I said, some of the things on screen here, so that we can find Stamp on the turn that we need to do it to our opponent, but also as a safeguard against our opponent as well. So it really does change how the game is played based off of this card being released alone. I think the entire game has changed just from this card. Next up, we have Stadium Navigator. This is a speculative 2-star from me. The community are a little bit more hyped on it. It allows you to flip 2 coins. For each heads, search your deck for a Stadium card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So it kind of reminds me of Adventure Bag. Adventure Bag was a guaranteed 2 tools, where a Stadium Navigator is like a 1... Like, yeah, most of the time it's just 1. But there are those high roll moments if you get multiple. And I think there are a couple of decks that really do function based off of their Stadium alone. And I think Thunder Mountain's the biggest one that stands out to me. If you're playing a heavy Volkner line in Pika-Rom, you could definitely consider adding in 1 Stadium Nav, because, you know, maybe on something like turn 2, if you've only attached to Pika-Rom on turn 1 or something, you could then Volkner to find yourself Stadium Navigator to guarantee yourself Thunder Mountain to get full blitzing on turn 2. So I think for exactly improving your full blitz odds on turn 2, this might be a one-of in heavy Volkner Pika-Roms, if that's the way that we build Pika-Rom in the future. Personally, I love high Volkner count in Pika-Rom post-rotation, because it helps you dig towards custom catchers, it helps you get Stadium Nav for Thunder Mountain, it helps you get Tag Switch, it gets you some really key pieces. So I really like a very high Volkner count in Pika-Rom. That's the reason I give credit to Stadium Nav and give it that 2-star, because I think it will at least be experimented in Pika-Rom. You could also argue that it's experimented in fossil-based decks. There's the new Pokemon Research Lab, which we'll talk about later on, but essentially the Research Lab needs to be found on turn 1, otherwise it starts becoming a very, very slow card. So giving yourself more than 4 outs to find yourself that Stadium on turn 1 via the likes of Stadium Nav can make things a lot easier for you to get your fossils into play and start playing the game. So Stadium Nav, I think in general, great for picking out key Prism Stars at the right time. You can see at the top, like for the Pika-Rom deck, I'm saying that there's a variety of stadiums that you can play. So again, digging them out at the right time, giving yourself a defense against, or an additional defense against Power Plant could be important as well. So Stadium Nav ticks a couple of boxes for me, enough so that I'm going to give it a 2-star and saying that I'm probably playing it in my own Pika-Rom as a one-of. It's kind of in and out of the deck as like one of those flexi spots, but overall I think I like it just enough. Next up we have Tag Switch. This is an obviously powerful card alongside some very key tag teams that we have in the game right now. It's an item that says move 2 energy from one of your tag team Pokemon to another of your Pokemon. Once Pika-Rom first came out, we saw lots of Rayquazas going into Pika-Rom alongside 4 Energy Switch and the likes of 2 or 3 Multi-Switch, because it was so important for us to get full blitzing as early as possible, trying to use things like Zeraora to retreat around our guys and just get into that full blitz. Now, Tag Switch makes life a lot easier for us, so that we can move our energies around. It's 2 in 1, so we can full blitz to the bench, knowing that 1 Tag Switch gets us able to Tag Bolt for the full value, which is amazing. And getting full value is what Tag Switch is all about. It's helping you get from that 3 energy to the big additional swing that we can get from the likes of, you know, Gardevoir Sylveon, for example. You're Kaleidostorming the entire time, you're using Fairy Song, and then you can Tag Switch, and all at once you can make your opponent shuffle their hand and get no cards. You can really help things out with Pika-Rom's full blitz. You can then like retreat into your Raichu, attach for turn, Tag Switch onto them, suddenly you're paralyzing your opponent. You have a lot of great options with this Tag Switch, and because it's already so like obviously good in Pika-Rom, you have to give this a 4-star. Like, it's guaranteed in that deck, which I still think is a top tier contender, by the way, post rotation, just because it keeps Radar and has Cherish Ball, and you have a good engine essentially in Pika-Rom. I think Tag Switch is guaranteed to be in that deck alone, which gives me that 4-star rating, but there's so many other options. There's even like spicy options with things like Buzzmosa, if you want to try that out post rotation, where you can try and go like Lieutenant Surge greens and get like Beast Rings onto stuff, and then Tag Switch off of it to get it onto different Pokemon as like a universal energy acceleration, which is pretty crazy if you think about it as well. So Yeah, there's a few different options for tag switch. Overall, it's guaranteed to be in Pikarom, and there's like a build around for some other like lower tier tag teams as well. I think it's pretty much like a great one-off in Reshizard, really good in Mewtwo as well. So tag switch is just a real big thumbs up from me. Great for tag team decks, which are pretty much dominating the format since they came out. Black Belt's a very interesting tool card. I'm surprised by myself for putting it this low, but I think it's more of an indictment on the amount of good fighting Pokemon we have in the meta rather than Black Belt itself. Black Belt is a tool that says if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponents, the attacks of the Pokemon this card is attached to cost fighting less. So it's similar to Counter Gain, but it specifies fighting less. The reason why this is so great is because you could try and add in some of these tech Pokemon that have fighting attack costs, and then you don't need to add in any actual fighting energy cards. For example, you could add in a Marshchamp into something like a Pikarom, improve your mirror match. You can just go for a Volkner on a certain turn, pick out Black Belt, attach a Lightning to a Marshchamp, come in, revenge, and suddenly you've swung the game in your favor. That's like a small example you can go for. I think Marshall Machamp is like the best option I could think about for Black Belt and the biggest reason to try and play Black Belt, because just being able to revenge for one energy out of nowhere is a great swing. If you are worried about some Pikarom players and stuff like that, it's still a great answer to him all in one foul swoop. From there, like there's stuff like Aerodactyl, there's Zygarde, there's Teenachomp, which could all potentially play this. I think overall Teenachomp is just going to be playing Malamar as Accelerator and then just have like Viridian to pick out fighting energy anyways. I think Aerodactyl probably won't play Black Belt either. I think more often than not, you're just going to play like fighting energies and Welders. Zygarde, I don't think you necessarily need Black Belt either, although you might be a slower deck depending on how you try and build it. If you build it heavily around the new baby Zygardes, you may be a bit quicker and be the one taking initial prizes in the first place because you're using those non-GXs to be your initial acceleration. So overall, I just think there aren't many reasons why you'd want to play Black Belt outside of exactly Marshall and Machamp. That combo, I will admit, is very, very strong. But that's like the only reason why I think the Black Belt will see play currently. But that being said, having a very, very specific reduction when you're behind is very strong for fighting decks, so do bear that in mind. Flyinium Z Air Slash is a very narrow tool that we're getting from the new set. There's two Z Crystal tools that we get from the set. This is the first of them, and it's only able to be put onto a Pokemon that has the Air Slash attack. From my knowledge, it's only this brand new, Silvally, which has Air Slash, that can actually use this Flyinium Z. So I think it's literally exactly this Pokemon that can take advantage of it. Kind of reminds me of a Power Memory for old Zygarde EX, because it comes with this new attack that you can use if you attach this tool. It's 4 colorless, you do 180, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. So it's essentially a Dawn Wings GX attack, but you don't have to be behind. So it's a very annoying attack. Gust is limited in the format, so you can do it on a turn where you perhaps reset Stamp or something like that. Make life difficult for the opponent, essentially buy yourself a free turn is the idea, whilst also doing 180 damage, which is a pretty good baseline. It's enough to knock out the Dene or a Blown, something like that, which is nice. But overall, I think it is very expensive. You can play 3 CE, of course, but overall, I think because the Silvally is not an impressive enough card in a vacuum to supplement the tool, I think currently there's no real home for this to be a contender. Next up, we have Giant Bomb. This is an interesting rework of Bursting Balloon in many ways. It says that if this card is attached to a Pokemon, discard it at the end of your opponent's turn. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is your active and takes 180 or more damage from an opponent's attack, put 10 counters on the attacking Pokemon. So this is intended really for decks that have a bad time against other one-hit KO based decks. Essentially ones like Reshizard, which is either doing Outrage for 30 or they're doing 230 with Flare Strike. So when they have no middle ground, Reshizard finds it very difficult to play around Giant Bomb. So if you're having a hard time against exactly Reshizard, Giant Bomb is an annoying tool for them. Once again, Gust is a lot less of a factor right now. So improving that matchup is potentially relevant enough for you to tech in the Giant Bombs. I think because this card is so narrow to exactly Reshizard, think about things like Blacephalon, which can scale its damage for 50 times the amounts. Think about Pikarom that can just do 150 with full blitz and whatnot. There's a lot of reasons why Giant Bomb can be played around if you have to. But I think the main sort of selling point of Giant Bomb is saying, hey, you can't knock me out this turn. If you don't knock me out this turn, my tag team stays in play or my GX Pokemon stays in play. Otherwise, you're taking this 10 damage. So as a huge deterrent from one-shots, that could be very interesting. It could basically put the ball in your opponent's court to be like, well, if you don't want to take this 10 damage, you have to gust away my biggest threat on the board, and I can keep that safe. So that's like the upside of Giant Bomb. There's also the very, very cool upside for Rotom, in that now you have 4 Giant Bomb and 4 Metal Core Barriers as a total of 8 tool cards, which if you can attach them like on turn 1 or 2, they will discard themselves at the end of the turn, so it automatically fuels your discard pile very quickly for Plasma Slice. So it's a nice, fun Mimi tool card for exactly the Rotom deck. But in a more general sense, I think overall it's a deterrent from one-hit KOs. Most notably Reshizard, because it finds it the most difficult to play around Giant Bomb. But there are a few other decks which can do it a lot easier, so that's something to bear in mind. But overall, I think it's probably a little bit worse than Bursting Balloon. Bursting Balloon was, that unconditional 6 if they just hit into you no matter what they do, and no matter how much damage it is. So Giant Bomb is a lot more narrow, and that's why I'm giving it a slightly lower rating, but still giving it the nod that Rotom's probably a road deck that might see a little bit of experimentation. Giant Bomb may be the Reshizard counter if you don't want to add in Water Tech Pokemon or whatnot. It could definitely help out, so definitely something to bear in mind. Next up, we have that second Z Crystal, Normalium Z Tackle. There are a few more candidates for Tackle, which is interesting. Once again, it can only be put on a Pokemon that has the Tackle attack. Then you're able to access the Dash Attack GX, which for 4 colorless does 200, and you flip a coin until you get tails. You do 40 more for each heads. 200 as a baseline is still not super impressive. It's basically doing the same knockouts, the Blacephalon, the Dedenne. Now you're able to knock out something like an Ultra Necrozma, which is something, I guess. But it reads very similarly to the Flyinium Z. This time you don't have the great sort of prevent damage done to you. Instead, you can flip for potentially high roll situations, like one heads flip and you knock out a Pikarom, which would be insane. But once again, the options we have for Tackle are still limited, even though there are a couple more. I've tried to look at cards that not only have the Tackle attack, but also can likely get to 4 energy cards. And these are the ones that I really looked at. I mean, there's a Heracross that can use Serena to accelerate energy cards to use a Normalium Z Tackle. Both Magnemites will then, if you're able to evolve into a Magnezone, then you can Crystal a Magnemite and then put 4 energies on them with Rain Dance, which could be quite funny. Imagine the beat stick of a Magnemite doing like 240 damage to a Pikarom. That would be hilarious to see. And then there's things like Steelix, which has 3 CE as an acceleration. But once again, overall, I don't think this is viable at all. All these attackers are not strong enough to stand up on their own, and you kind of need them to be good enough to Pokemon on their own to even consider building a deck around Z Tackle, because it's one turn in the game once you've committed 4 energies to something, and that's just not all that viable in my opinion. We move on to UTurn Board. This is a very nice tool card. I think it might overtake Escape Board one day, but right now Escape Board is still in the format, and Escape Board is still the cornerstone to go off of because of Stellar Wish Jirachi. Essentially, because UTurn Board can't go on Jirachi, it is already very, very devalued in my opinion. However, it does say that the retreat cost of your Pokemon is 1 less. If this card would go to the discard pile from play, put it into your hand instead. So it's more infinite than Escape Board. Your opponent can't, obviously Field Blower is gone from the format, but for example, if they're going to hit you with like a Farfetch'd or something and discard your tool, you would instead get the UTurn Board back into your hand to reattach to new Pokemon. There's a couple of reasons why this might be nice. There's a Mareep that has some Sleep synergy, and Sleep is a mini theme going on in this set with the Breloom and the Amoonguss and the Slumber Forest that we'll talk about in a moment. And also there's the option of hit and run style decks. Hit and run decks, if they have 1 retreaters, like Goomies and a few other things here and there, if you just play like 3 U-turn boards, you will have an infinite means of hit and run Pokemon to continually retreat out of. That's one of the biggest sort of downsides of hit and run Pokemon, is that you will run out of switches. You can run out of float stones back in the day and stuff like that. U-turn board, meaning that when you're just sacking Goomy after Goomy or whatever else you have in the active, U-turn board will keep coming back to you for your next Pokemon that you just pivot into. So that's the biggest upside of U-turn board that I see right now. but the amount of Pokemon that you want to pivot into that only has a 1 retreat cost is actually pretty low. So I think overall it's not going to see play unless you're exactly a deck that doesn't need a skateboard for Jirachi, but still needs to have that 1 retreat cost less. Even then, I would say, because Paralysis is relevant enough with Raichu, you might still want to play Escape Boards anyway. So UTurn Board, probably exactly good for hit and run decks and this Mareep Breloom kind of shenanigans deck that I'll talk about later. So just a 2 stars from me. Clearly good card, but overshadowed by the Escape Board. We then have Big Oven. Man, I am so sold on this card. Community agree. Just over 50% of them put it at a 5-star card. This is phenomenal. I'm not going to make the same mistake I made with Viridian way back when. I am definitely impressed with Big Oven. I've tried to shove it into a bunch of fire decks, and I'm already just thinking that fire is so good for Worlds, because you have Big Oven for synergies with Welder, for synergies with Ninetales, synergies with Salazzle. It's just too good to say no to. It's a Viridian Forest +1 for exactly fire types. Let me read it out to you. Once during each player's turn, that player may discard a card from their hand. If they do, search their deck for 2 fires, reveal them, put them into your hand. That's amazing. So Viridian Forest was already in a number of fire decks. It's already in like Malamar and stuff, and it's a build around card in many ways. It allows you to thin the deck. You can lower your hand size if you want to just fail it and just get rid of excess Pokemon. So it's reset stamp proofing, whilst also thinning the deck of fire energies, which for fire decks are the most relevant cards to pick out from the deck, because once again, it makes Welder much more live. Like, Welder's like a much more often live target in your hand now. Ninetales is your new gusting mechanic a lot of the time, and Roast Reveal gets you even more cards. So Big Oven thinning the deck of 2 cards that would otherwise be dead, whilst also activating all of your best abilities and your best supporter card in the deck, is just too good to say no to. Big Oven is absolutely immense, and a big reason why I think Fire is so powerful post-rotation. I really do think that Fire is on top of the game thanks to the Stadium card. The Stadium gets silly value. Think about moving Energy Search up to Professor's Letter and how crazy that step up was. Now, Viridian Forest, which is already a card played in a lot of decks. Like, back then, Energy Search was never played, but then Professor's Letter, like, kind of was here and there. Now we're going from an already possibly, like, 5-star card in Viridian Forest, now getting an upgrade of the same measure. That's just so ridiculous. Big Oven is on a crazy high power level, and really worth building around. And it may even make some of these, like, not purely fire decks try and add in a Welder engine. Things like Whimsicott, things like Aerodactyl, things like Blissey, they'll be loving the Big Oven because you can play a lower count of fire energies and then just have Big Oven and Fire Crystal to sort of make up for that counterbalance, and then you're able to have access to the busted Gust of Ninetales, the busted draw of Roast Reveal. Big Oven just opens up these doors for you, and I am absolutely sold on this card. It's incredible. And of course, you know, Reshizard will play it, etc. Blizzard Town is another stadium, a little bit less impressive for me. A very strange stadium. I've not seen anything quite like this stadium before. Each Pokemon in play with 40 or less remaining hit points can't attack. So it's a big feels bad man for Night March and Lost March to an extent as well. It's also a bit of a check to Spiritomb that wants to try and build Spite and use Anguish Cry. But overall, that's, again, just such a narrow stadium. You're not really doing much with this. You're really not stopping people a lot of the time. There's some speculation to this potentially being like a mirror match card for things like Reshizard, where we can no longer one-shot them outside of the Double Blaze GX turn. And even then, Double Blaze is harder to do now that we have lost Kiawe. So the idea is you could hit them with a Flare Strike whilst putting down a Blizzard Town and just saying, hey, do you have the counter stadium on this turn? Overall, I think that's a very poor attempt at trying to have a good mirror match. I think there are far better ways you can improve mirror. You can go about the mirror in different ways. If you could just go for like Outrage plus Koga's Trap on that turn, and it's a far better option than just going for the Flare Strike plus Blizzard Town. I think it's just much more risky. So overall, Blizzard Town is pretty poor. There's the fun meme potential of going like a Blizzard Town plus Reset Stamp on turns where you can't quite reach a knockout on a tag team, and then you just say, do you have the answer out of 1 or 2 card hands, which could be hilarious to see in interesting spots. But overall, I think it's too narrow. I think putting something down to 40 hit points is just not easy to do for a lot of decks in the first place, especially against tag teams. A lot of the time you look to 2-shot around the like 150 damage into 150 damage range, stuff like that. So I think there aren't many opportunities for Blizzard Town to see play. Next up we have Night City. This is a stadium for the new Dark-based archetype that I have been relatively impressed with, to be honest. I do definitely like the Dark deck. I think it's a consideration archetype for sure. And this stadium is one of the potential reasons. We lose Altar of the Moon, of course, but this comes in to take its place. All basic Dark Pokemon in play have no retreat cost. That's a pretty big deal when something like Sableye Tyranitar now has a 4 retreat cost and is probably going to go into the deck. Umbreon and Darkrai has a 2 retreat cost, so does Greninja Zoroark. And the whole idea around the Dark deck is you're going to use Weavile to move the energies around, so also having freedom of movement basically is giving us back the option of Fairy Garden plus Aromatisse that we knew way back at the beginning of XY block. So we're kind of having like pseudo reprints of the Fairy support now in Dark form, and I think the Tag Team Dark Pokemon combine to be relatively strong as long as they're able to stay in play for enough turns to get into that big energy count for things like Sableye and Tyranitar. But Night City, I think, it does have to compete with Viridian Forest, which is a great stadium card in the Dark deck because it gives you means into extra energy cards and dumps extra energy cards for you to use with Naganadel and stuff. But Night City just gives you that great pivoting option that I think is mandatory in the deck. It's possibly like a 2 count in my eyes. Pokemon Research Lab is a 3-star card in my opinion. It is kind of trying to open the doors for these fossil support. There's a few interesting fossils that we currently have in format in Kabutops and Omastar, both disruptive options. And then we get a couple new ones from this set as well. The Pokemon Research Lab says, once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for up to 2 cards that evolve from unidentified fossil and play them onto their bench. Then that player shuffles their deck and their turn ends. So you're cheating evolution, but not only evolution, the worst evolution that we have accessible to us. Fossils have been so mistreated throughout the entire game, as we all know. Trying to get unidentified fossils onto your board is a huge pain. You have things like Jirachi and a Bill's Analysis that can help you get there, but it's always been less consistent than any other just regular basic old Pokemon. Now we finally have that rectified by having a Research Lab as an option to instantly cheat out double Aerodactyl or something like Aerodactyl Omanyte or whatever else it is, whatever combination you go for. You can cheat those evolutions into play and suddenly you can start attaching to them and do all that good stuff. Now, bear in mind the huge card text at the bottom, your turn ends. That means if you are a fossil deck and you're trying to use the stadium card, you still can't get a manual attachment onto your Pokemon turn 1. So if you are going to try and play the Aerodactyl GX deck, you definitely need to have energy acceleration. That's why I mentioned Welder with it earlier, because you basically have to know that you go Research Lab turn 1, turn 2, Welder attach, because you can't lab, then attach, then pass. You end your turn on this Research Lab. So definitely something to note. Also, it's very, very slow if you're, not able to find it on turn 1. So you still need to commit a lot of spaces to your deck for probably like 2 or 3 unidentified fossils, even if you play 4 Research Labs and play Jirachis and stuff to try and get into them as consistently as possible, because you have a 1-turn window to try and use that Research Lab, and then it's down to Ditto Prism plus like 1 or 2 more unidentified fossils to see you out for the rest of your attackers. If you're non-GX Aerodactyl, you're probably still playing 4 unidentified fossils, to be fair, because you have to chain the Aerodactyl as much as possible. So it's not like you get completely fixed, or your fossils still are awkward, and you still need to commit a lot of deck space. 4 Research Lab and like 3 fossils themselves, and then 4 Jirachis and escape boards and switches and whatever else. It's still awkward for you, don't get me wrong, but this is a huge upgrade to just having the fossils in the first place. And I think there are enough interesting fossil Pokemon out there that I have to give this some consideration. So that's why we're going to give this a 3-star, because it does make some of these fossils much more build around and much more reasonable options in the deck. Or sorry, reasonable options as a deck. I do think it will be low tier, even though the Aerodactyl has a lot of good points to it, the GX and the non-GX, to be fair. Both of them are definitely reasonable cards, the best of the bunch in my opinion. I do think they will still end up falling a little bit short just because their fossil mechanic is still a little bit too awkward. Next up we have Slumber Forest. I'm going to give this a 1-star. Even though the stadium itself isn't that weak, it's just kind of the deck that will try and build around it I don't think will be successful. The stadium says, flip 2 coins instead of 1 for sleep between turns. If either of them is tails, that Pokemon is still asleep. So if you're inducing sleep on the opponent, Obviously, this is a stadium that you're going to add. It just makes life much more awkward for them. It's more likely that they will stay asleep and not be able to attack you if you have the stadium in play. And it's kind of a rapid stadium as well. It's not like the opponent can bounce it and then only flip one coin. Because it's a between turns effect, if you Slumber Forest that turn, you've sent them to sleep, they're only having a 25% chance of waking up and doing anything to you. This is obviously much stronger now that Guzma's rotated, and Escape Rope and even Ace of Roller to an extent. All of those going is so good for status conditions in general. Confusion, Paralysis, Sleep, these are all much, much stronger in this meta. And the idea around Slumber Forest is going to be a 2-hit KO based deck, using Fluffy Pillow from Mareep to send stuff to sleep. Then Breloom comes in and uses its 1 energy attack to do 120 to them because they're asleep. That's the whole idea of the archetype. That's the sort of combo that you're looking for with this deck. And you're trying to use Slumber Forest as the stadium that sort of glues it all together and makes it consistent that your opponent is sleeping. So that's kind of the option of the deck. But overall, because you're a non-GX build, that's pretty much the live and die of this deck. You're entirely non-GXs. It's hard to find non-GXs. It's hard to chain Breylooms. That's my biggest issue. But if there are not many decks playing Mixed Herbs, and if there are not many decks playing Tate and Liza or Switch, you can definitely punish them and try and go for 2 shots because you have this cool combo. Overall, I think it'll end up being too inconsistent to work, but it definitely is threatening because adding 2 shots onto your opponent passing into you for certain turns, that's a great combination. So I think if this was slightly more, if we had more ball search for exactly Breloom, I think it would work. But because we can't, rescue Stretcher anymore, we can't just Ultra Ball for Brelooms or whatnot. We are just left with Pokecom, really, to try and find our stage 1s. Life is too awkward to make this deck work. That's going to be the only shame here. Otherwise, I would be a much bigger fan of this archetype because its type coverage is good, and 2-shotting whilst also frustrating the opponent on certain turns and making it so they can't attack you could be great. But overall, I think it's a little bit too below the bar. And also, of course, bear in mind that Escape Board is still a big enough card in a lot of Jirachi-based decks that people can still retreat out of sleep too often against you. That's the biggest headache, I think. Next up, we have Recycle Energy. I'm really hyped to see this card back because it's one of these cards that I've loved in the past, and it's one that I always play in my cube. But I think overall, it's once again one of these cards that's a little bit narrow in my opinion. It's best alongside Crazy Code Porygon because you can try and spam this multiple times. But there are a few other reasons why this could see play. The Recycle Energy says that if this card is put into your discard pile from play, return it to your hand. So it's similar to the U-turn board, right? If it would go from play into the discard, it instead comes back into your hand. So if one of your Pokemon has this attached to it and is knocked out, instead of everything going to the discard pile, the energy goes straight back to your hand. So you're getting a reusable, literally a recyclable, colorless energy card. Now, colorless energy isn't all that great, to be honest. There's only a handful of cards that can use this in general because many of our attackers want to have specific energies attached to them to fill their attack costs. But there are a couple exceptions, and of course, Crazy Code being able to reuse this throughout the entire game is really awesome because you're able to spam Crazy Code more and more and more. So there's a couple of GXs that you could think about, something like Whimsicott trying to use Energy Blow alongside Porygon Z, which we've seen in the past. Now you can use these Recycle Energies. Whenever you draw into them, you can instantly slap them down onto your Whimsicott, carefree, knowing that even if your opponent, or if you flip tails on Fluffy Cotton and your Whimsicott gets knocked out, you can get back, 1 or 2 or 3, or in the dream scenario, 4 Recycle Energies. That's a recoverable 120 damage that you can instantly put onto your next Whimsicott. So your damage output can really get insane and stays very strong if you are the Whimsicott deck and you're able to build up Porygon and find all these Recycle Energies. Also, it's pretty cool for attackers that need to discard energies. Things like the Naganadel GX. There's been some Japanese lists leaked of like Porygon Z with Naganadel GX when its sniping attack requires you to discard 2 energies. So that would discard, and then the recycles would be the ones that you pay the cost for, and they come back to your hand, and then next turn, either you get knocked out, and then you get the other recycle energies back, or you stay on board, and then you can just Crazy Code them back onto the active, and once again do that 170 damage with Naganadel GX, and the cost is a lot less of an issue. You've guaranteed your way back into these energies for the following turn. That's the whole idea. There's also a handful of fully colorless attackers. The new Aegislash is, interestingly enough, has like the rescue energy effect in his own ability. So attaching a rescue energy to that would mean that literally you pick up all the Pokemon and the energy that get knocked out, and then you can like replay bits and bobs of them onto your bench and get into your next Aegislash and literally chain for the entire game. I think the Aegislash deck is trying to play exactly 4 recycle energies and then just the thick Aegislash line and try and recycle those, which is a fun rogue deck as well. I think you could consider putting this at a 3-star. It depends on the Porygon Z and how consistent we are able to find the stage 2. That's my main criticism right now. I'm a little bit worried and skeptical that we can actually make Porygon Z consistent enough to work. That's my only like cynicism around Recycle Energy, because it's obviously insane with Crazy Code. It's just how long it takes to actually get Crazy Code rolling, which is where I'm having trouble like seeing it work. That's my biggest issue. So that's why I'm recycling. That's why I'm putting Recycle Energy a little bit low, because I don't think it will go in a lot of our conventional decks. But if Porygon succeeds, then Recycle Energy will definitely be seeing a lot of play. Next up, we have Weak Guard Energy. I'm actually putting this at a 3-star, a little bit over Recycle Energy, even though the community were kind of flip-flopped on the special energies. This provides a colorless and simply says the Pokemon this card is attached to has no weakness. So it's weakness policy in a colorless energy card. And I actually think this is very, very strong. When we have some big flagship tag team Pokemon that we're trying to use for tanking potential, or just, you know, if it stays on board for a turn or two, it can run away with the game. All you want to do is have a weak guard energy on there so that you don't get knocked out. Many times when you have 270, 260 hit points or whatever, the only way your opponent can knock you out is via having whatever type counter to you. So they can, you know, they hit 150, but then it gets doubled for a big knockout. That's oftentimes how we see people add in tech Pokemon to counter you. That's how we saw things like the Slowking go into Zoroark decks or the Dugong or whatever else it was. People were trying to take advantage of this big ×2 weakness that you have as this big Pokemon to just take 3 prizes out of nowhere. So having Weak Guard Energy could give you a real great safeguard against that. That's the whole idea. And I think many people sort of relate this to Weakness Policy, but I think the card is very, very different, because Weakness Policy is only a useful card in exactly the matchup where they're hitting you for weakness. Whereas this energy card, it's always a colorless energy. It's always, you know, an attached for turn. It's never going to be too detrimental. Whereas Policy, you can think about, this is a dead space in every other matchup. Weak Guard Energy is much less of that. It's still obviously worse than having a colored energy a lot of the time, because, you know, a lot of these tag team Pokemon, they only have 1 colorless in their attack cost. So you could get punished if you play like 3 Weak Guard Energy and then only draw into those and not your, you know, grass or fire or metal or whatever else it is. You can get punished, but adding in like 2 Weak Guard Energy usually shouldn't be too detrimental to your deck, because, you know, you can still just attach them like any other energy card, and as long as you have some element of colorless in your attack cost, you then sort of for free almost get this huge safeguard against being countered by some big basic that can just come in and swing and take all the prizes at once. So I think that's the reason why it's most reasonable. I also really like it in the Naganadel Beast Box decks. Having the Beast Raid Naganadel as like your early beat stick is really nice, but it has a horrible weakness of Psychic. You do not want to see things like Giratina in Malamar, which, you know, every Malamar will probably play some Giratinas. Also, you're worried about things like Mew and Mewtwo just copying any attack and being able to like blow through you, and you're worried about mirror matches, right? So having 3 or 4 Weak Guard Energy in the Naganadel GX deck is fine, because your attack cost is colorless once again. Similar to the Aegislash, right? The Aegislash could always use Recycle Energy because its attack cost was colorless. Here, there's no reason why you shouldn't play Weak Guard Energy, because your attack cost is colorless. So you can just happily attach onto Naganadel on against like Giratina, and then you're no longer worried. Now they're 2-shotting you, maybe even less if you have things like Stack Attacker to make life awkward for them. So Weak Guard Energy, I think for exactly Beast Box, I'm giving this a 3-star rating. But also, you could add in 1 or 2 copies into your Mewtwo, into your Reshizard, into your Alolan Eggs, and suddenly you remove your weakness, and it's a lot better than Weakness Policy. I really am sticking my neck out and saying this is so much like less invasive than Policy, which is a card in your deck that's for exactly 1 matchup. Weak Guard Energy is very much a similar case, but in every other matchup, it's not like you look at it with Despise because it's just a useless dead card. It's at very least an attachment for turn somewhere which can help you out. So that's why I'm a big fan of this card in general. We move on to Pokemon for the first time, and I'm going to take a quick swig of water. Starting off with the grass types, we have Amoonguss. It's a 1-star from me. This has the ability Spread Spore, which is trying to be what you kind of build around here. Once during your turn, when you play a Pokemon with the Spore attack from your hand into play, your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep and poisoned. Just a quick note, the Fungus has the Spore attack, so that would be the thing that you put down to force sleep and poison on your opponents. It also has a Venoshock attack for 2 colorless. You do 20, plus if your opponent's active is poison, this does 70 more, so essentially 100 for 2 energies, because that poison damage starts racking up. Overall, I think this is pretty poor. You could think about it alongside like the Hot Poison Salazzle, where you can just like bench Funguses on certain turns, then your opponent starts going to sleep, and you're also doing extra damage with poison, which is kind of cute, but overall I think it's too inconsistent. Stage 1s are hard to search out when they're non-GXs. Even though we have Netball to find Fungus very easily, I think it's a little bit awkward to try and get this guy out. The upside of sending your stuff to sleep is obviously nice alongside Slumber Forest if you're trying to be a 2-hit KO deck. And we even have Koga's Trap for helping out poison things, so you don't have to play a Fungus every single turn to use Venoshock for the full value. But overall, I think there's, once again, just not enough powerful Pokemon to take advantage of this with. There's the Breloom deck that you're going to try and build, I guess. There's the Alolan Grimer and Ariados. There's a few things here and there which work off of status conditions, but overall I don't think it's good enough. And I think Breloom is probably just going to play Mareep UTurn Board over Amoonguss. I think it's a little bit less clunky overall. So yeah, I think he's definitely one to ignore. Next up, we have our first Tag Team GX Pokemon, Rowlet and Alolan Exeggutor Tag Team GX. It's a 270 hit point grass type that is weak to fire. So immediately the alarm bells are ringing. I've just talked about Big Oven and why I think it makes fire decks absolutely insane. So we have to really get a lot out of this Rowlet and Exeggutor to even consider it in the format. Bear in mind there is things like Weak Guard Energy, and there's also a Stage 1 Cherim, I believe it is, that removes your weakness, but that's all very cute stuff. So we really need to get a lot out of this Pokemon to even consider it in our format. It does have a colorless attack cost called Super Growth, and it says search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your grass Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it, and then if it's a Stage 1, you can then search the deck for a Stage 2 and put that into play as well. So you're cheating your way all the way from a basic that's in play up to a Stage 2, as long as the basic is a grass Pokemon as well. So you can see the Vikavolt on the far right. That's obviously a lightning Pokemon, but Grubbin is a grass basic. So you could go straight from Grubbin into Charjabug into Vikavolt. Even if the Charjabug's a lightning type, that doesn't matter either, because it only states grass Pokemon in the first instance, and then you can evolve up to whatever you like. I think Vikavolt's the only example of this, but there might be 1 or 2 other grass basics that branch off into other things. But that's definitely something to bear in mind. And there are some cool Stage 2 grass types that you could try and abuse in this format. Power of Nature is a pretty cool one initially, just because it could completely swing a awful Bucephalon matchup into almost an auto win. If you can attach to your Sceptile or your Trico turn 1 and then Super Growth into Sceptile, and then even if they knock out your Alolan Egg, like you can just sit there with Sceptile and win the game against Bucephalon, unless they have non-Ultra Beast style attackers. You have Meganium, which can quick Ripening Herb out other Stage 2 Pokemon, so you can do that initial cheating with Rowlet Egg and then start cheating other evolutions into play with Meganium all at once, which is pretty cool. There's Victory Bell, which is Fragrance Trap. Once during your turn, you can flip a coin. If heads, you can choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and become active. So everyone talks about Custom Catcher and Ninetales being the only 2 gusting effects, but actually there's one more in Victory Bell. And only Rowlet Eggs, I think, is going to be able to use Victory Bell effectively because of this Super Growth that you can cheat him out into play. There's a Serena, which we'll get onto literally next, but that's your Energy Accelerator. It attaches Grass Energy from discard to your active Pokemon, so that's once per turn, by the way. So that's like the main accelerator if you want to be an attacking deck with Rowlet Eggs. And there's even a new Leavanny, which I'm not talking about too much in the set review outside of this quick mention. Grass Pokemon take 40 less damage from attacks when he's out. He's non-stackable, so he would just get a 1-1-1 line of him all into play at once and get him rolling. So Super Growth really has a nice plethora of options. I think Serena is guaranteed if you're playing a Rowlet Eggs deck, because that's how you go into his other 2 attacks a lot more easily. I also think the Sceptile is probably worth playing a 1-1-1 line of, especially because the Grovil's a good Pokemon anyway for you, because in every other matchup, he can still just be used to search out things for you. And Victory Bell is also definitely an interesting one to bear in mind. If you're able to Super Growth on turn 1 and on turn 2, if the format's slow enough or if you're up against a greedier deck, you can get this Victory Bell going and start using Fragrance Trap, which is awesome. So definitely something to bear in mind. What are the other attacks we have on offer? Calming Hurricane for Grass colors does 150 and you heal 30 from this Pokemon. So I think for Super Growth alone, and because DCE is rotating, Rowlet Eggs overtakes Venusaur as the tanky grass type, because you heal 30 from yourself already. There's a potential for Choice Helmet, there's a potential for Shamans, there's a potential for Life Forest. Grass has a lot of healing, so if you think that you can tank now, especially with things like Kukui and Choice Band rotating, and if you add in this Cherim or Weak Guard Energy or whatever else to make yourself have a defense against fire decks, you could try and just be this big healing deck with, once again, all these healing options that the grass deck has, and just try and spam Calming Hurricane the entire time. That's pretty much the incentive of playing this archetype. Overall, I think it's a little bit too weak. There's too much one-hit KO in my books for this to succeed too well. But that's kind of the option that we're trying to build with this deck. It does have the Tropical Hour GX attack that does 200 for 3 grass. Once again, that's nice against things like Ultra Necrozma, which is one of your worst matchups, I would say, because it can knock one out at the very least. But it says if this has an additional 3 energy attached to it, your opponent shuffles all energy from all of their Pokemon into their deck. So it's similar to a Palkia GX attack that we've seen previously, but very, very expensive. Even with Serena getting this rolling, I think you'll pretty much never get the full value of this card. So yeah, I think overall, try and build a tanking deck if you want to. It will be stronger than Celosaur. You can basically take that same Celosaur shell, but now you play like a 2/2/2 Serena line, a 1/1/1 Sceptile, and then possibly a 1/1/1 Victory Bell. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. But then you just shove in all the healing cards for this and try and tank with Rowlet Eggs and have fun with that. That's basically the intention here. You still spam the board of Floral Heal Shamans and whatnot. There's so little Gust in the format that your opponent probably isn't going to be able to Gust 3 non-GXs in most situations. And that means that your opponent has to keep going through the Rowlet, and you can keep healing that off, and it'll be super annoying for the opponent. That's the idea behind this archetype. Overall, I think it'll probably end up flopping. I think it's too difficult for you to find a Cherim or a Weak Guard Energy in time against the fire decks, because they can just go Welder, attach, dead, and then you're 3 prizes behind, and things get really rough for you. And the base output of a Reshizard or the base output of Blounds, they're all too high for you a lot of times. That makes life very difficult for you. So I think that's the biggest issue for this deck. The fire stuff is still keeping it at bay, in my opinion. Next up, we have that Serena. As mentioned, it allows you to attach a grass energy from your discard to your active Pokemon. Now, it's very similar to the Blaziken. Obviously, it's a stage 2, very comparable. The difference is this is a cheater. This gets cheated up by Super Growth, and that's the only reason why I'm giving this a 2-star instead of a 1. It gets cheated out by that Rowlet Egg. Rowlet Eggs, and that's like the only partner I see it going in. Potentially, Rowlet Eggs could also add in some other Pokemon like Buzzmosa or like Eevee Snorlax and stuff, but overall, I think it's exactly going to see any amount of play for the Super Growth attack, and that's about it. Otherwise, Malamar's still our best accelerator, but good to know that we have another accelerator from the discard pile, and this time we can cheat this one out, even though it's a stage 2. On to the fire stuff. We start off with a Camerupt. This is a 4 retreat cost Pokemon, as is Numel, so it can actually be used in a Maniac engine, which is hilarious. It's a 140 hit point stage 1 that has the tackle attack, so it can also use the Normalium Z. This is like the build around card if you want to play all the memey new cards that we have from the set, the Pokemaniac and the new Z Crystal. It also has the strong flare attack for a fire and 3 colorless. You do 150 and discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. Arcanine, I should bear in mind, also has a 4 retreat cost. So potentially there's this kind of fun non-GX rogue fire deck where you play a 4/4 Arcanine and like a 3/3 Camerupt and 1 Normalium Z Crystal, and just try and welder onto these things, Grand Flame onto the Camerupt, get your Z Crystal rolling and get a big value turn. But overall, I don't foresee Arcanine being strong enough in the format. 140 is easy to hit for a lot of these tag teams in one shot, so that sort of tanking option that he had in the previous format when Zapdos was a big theme. It's no longer really the case. So there's no real benefit to having like chunky stage 1 Pokemon, especially when it's difficult to search these out. Even with Maniac, I would still argue that it's difficult to find all the Pokemon that you need for this deck, because you need to rely on Welder on many turns and whatnot, so things get a little bit awkward. So overall, pretty poor card. Worth noting though, because it synergizes with those 2 fun new cards that we have from the set. Next up we have Chandler, and man, I wanted, once again, this card to work. I always love sort of believing in these dreams early on, and once again, it'll be one of these things that I play on stream and have a lot of fun with, but that's really where this card lies in the fun factor. It's a stage 2 fire type with that Soul Burner attack for 1 fire. You do 10 and discard the top 5 cards of your deck. You do 60 for each Pokemon that you discard from those top 5, and then put any number of fire Pokemon onto your bench. That's the key text here. He is, once again, a huge cheater. He likes to cheat all of your fire buddies into play. He even cheats by having Duststone, so you can go Litwick into Lampent, into Duststone, and potentially on turn 2, you can be using the Soul Burner attack. And if there are other things like other Chandelures, other Lampents, other Salazzles, other Ninetales, if you play one Incineroar, these can all get cheated out into play. That's the whole idea about this deck. It really reminds you of things like Typhlosion and Gyarados of the past, where it's RNG based how much damage you're churning out. But in this case, unlike those other 2 predecessors, you have the big upswing of cheating. I think the biggest thing around Typhlosion and Gyarados is their damage outputs were much more, whereas Chandler, you pretty much really need to high roll, especially in those early turns. You really need to high roll your Pokemon. If your first Soul Burner only gets you 2 Pokemon and it's like a Litwick and a Lampent, you instantly lose the game, right? Because it's so hard for you to get into good damage, and you've already wasted a turn doing 130, and you've not done any cheating to draw any extra cards. But if your first Soul Burner is a Salazzle, a Chandler, and a Ninetales, suddenly you're able to use some of the most busted abilities in the game, also draw a lot more cards with Roast Reveal, and you have your guaranteed next Chandelure the following turn as well. Whilst also at that time you've done 190, which is enough to knock out like a basic GX and stuff like that. So there's big high roll potential with Soul Burner, which is very fun and cool. But you do have to jam-pack your deck with, I think the list I built has 33 Pokemon in it. And you have to have Brock's Grit as well, of course, because you're discarding the top 5 cards of your deck turn by turn. Eventually, you will deck yourself out without the help of Brock's Grit. And of course, there's no telling when you will discard your own Brock's Grits, which is also a problem. That's why I'm having a thick Delcatty line to search for friends to grab these Brocks back whenever you discard them. So, very, very fun archetype, but no more than that. Just a meme for me. Unlike the Gyarados, where it naturally like filters out the bad cards that you can have in the top 5 cards, that's never the case for Chandelure, so your damage is always risky, no matter what turn it is. You can never guarantee it until it's like the last prize of the game or whatever, when you just go, okay, Brock's Grit, attack for game. Like, that's really all you can do, so yeah, definitely meme potential, but there's huge high rolls as well. If you get that 5 Pokemon and it's like Chandelure, Salazzle, or whatever, things get really awesome for you. Next up, we have a Heatran GX. It's a basic 190 hit points Pokemon that has the ability Burning Road. It's very similar to the Path of Life ability from Xerneas Prism Star. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon was on the bench and became your active Pokemon this turn, you may move any number of fire energy attached to your Pokemon to him. So don't get him confused with Aero Trail. You have to get the Heatran into the active first, and then he starts stealing the energy cards off your other stuff. Unlike Tapu Koko, where you just bench him, he steals stuff and then jumps into the active. So it's a bit more DIY with the Heatran, which is why I'm a little bit less convinced on it overall. It does have the explosive stamp attack. For fire colors, you do 130. That's enough to get through a lot of non-GX threats, which is pretty cool. Especially if like your Rechizard's been hit for a lot of damage, you can just bench Heatran, use a switch or something, steal those energies and just knock out a non-GX, which is reasonable. He also has this big Heat Bomber GX attack, which for 1 fire does 50 for each fire attached to this Pokemon. My sort of beef with the Heatran is that Double Blaze is just a better GX attack all the time. Blacephalon always wants to use the other GX attack as well. It wants to use Burst GX pretty much every game at some point. So Heatran, if it had a more powerful GX attack, I'd be sort of more convinced on him. But because the ability is do it yourself anyway, like you can just switch into any attacker regardless. Especially if you're a fire deck, you can just like weld a switch to whatever you want. So the Heatran doesn't impress me all that much. I gave it a 2-star for its experimentation. Potentially it can bail you out of bad spots, but I think overall it'll be like a 1 of, possibly 0 of in Reshizard-based builds. We move on to the water stuff, starting off with another fossil. Caracosta is a stage 2. I've already talked about the research lab as the way that you can help cheat this guy out these days. And he has the ability Old Custom. As long as this Pokemon is in play, each of your opponent's Pokemon tool cards have no effect. So it sort of goes alongside the other 4 things you can see on the top right of the screen here. The Caracosta is the 5th option that we have of shutting down tools. There are some definitely scary and annoying tools in the format right now. There are some awkward fairy charms that are difficult to get around. There's, of course, the fear of Shedinja continuing to be an archetype post-rotation now that Field Blower has rotated. And there's also things like Choice Helmet, which can help tanking archetypes as well. All of these are pretty much not kept in check anymore now that there are far less good options to remove the effects of tools or remove them in general. So if you really are concerned about tools and you really want to win a Shedinja matchup, if you're at Worlds and you're already playing a fossil deck, think about adding in 1 Tortuga and 1 Caracosta. Other than that, I think these other options are stronger. Faber, of course, can be nice and versatile because it can also punish special energy cards and tools at the same time. Pachirisu and Farfetch'd are very, like, if you're very scared of Shedinja, maybe add in one of these. Both Overshort and Toolbuster can remove tools and do more damage based on that. But then there's the Lysander Labs. That's probably the one we're going to see the most amount of play, unless you want to play Palpad and Faber as like 1-1 to help improve your Shedinja line. Lysander Labs I can definitely foresee having the most amount of play. Caracosta, probably the least. So yeah, I think he's annoying stage 2, difficult to build around unless you're already a fossil deck. And even then, I don't think it's worth the space, unless you think your fossil deck is already weak to Shedinja. And bear in mind, if you're playing Aerodactyl GX, it's hard for them to reuse a Rangaroo the entire game because of Aegislash's... not Aegislash, what am I talking about? Aerodactyl's ability. So it's hard for them to use resource management turn by turn by turn. So you may already have a reasonable matchup against Shedinja already. So I don't think it's necessarily worth the space overall. Next up, we have a Cryogonal. It's a 90 hit point water type that has the attack Tick-Tock Lock. For a water, you do 10, and your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand during their next turn. Don't freak out, this is not Seismitoad EX. Seismitoad was good because he could tank. He had Fury Belt, he had things like AZ and Acerola and whatnot. So the 30 damage you were doing was never quite 30 damage with Toad. You had lasers, you had Fury Belt, you had Muscle Band, you had all that stuff. Tick-Tock Lock is terrible damage. Consider this much more similar to the Proclaim the Night Hoot Hoot that we got back in Breakthrough. Now, Hoot Hoot saw play in exactly early renditions of Decidueye before we decided that Vileplume was the better route. Some people actually attacked with Hoot Hoot for certain turns to slow the opponent down, whilst you lock stuff with Decidueye. Cryogonal is much more similar to that. I think if you are playing Rainbow Energies, or if you happen to be playing Water Energies, the only real consideration for Cryogonal is if you have like a tag team or a GX or something on the bench that you don't want your opponent to target, and you want to buy yourself a turn so that you can accumulate a way to win the game yourself, you could try and use Tick-Tock Lock to buy yourself some time with an on-GX in the active that doesn't, lose you the game, for example. If your opponent has 2 or 3 prizes left, for example, you could just try and use Cryogonal and then say, you can't custom catch her for a win condition. I've already hit you with a reset stamp, so it's hard for you to like Cherish Ball, find a Dene or whatnot. You really limit your opponent's out to like win the game against you. You can't Fire Crystal for Ninetales to try and win the game as well. I think the biggest thing is like you basically sit behind a non-GX for a turn or two to try and help you find your own custom catchers for game or something similar along those lines, because that's how a lot of games are finished these days. It's finished by someone getting the custom catcher combo to win out the game. So Cryogonal slowing your opponent down may have some consideration for exactly that purpose, but I can't give it credit anywhere else. Do not think this is Seismitoad at all. It's not even close. Don't get super hyped on it. I think it's only a very, very niche and narrow card in general for denying your opponent the custom catcher win condition. Frostlass, I also think is a pretty overhyped card in general. Community's been relatively hyped on it, but I'm skeptical that it's easy to find stage 1s. And also, damaging yourself is already awkward. It's not got a colorless attack cost, so you already need to be playing something like Unit Energy or Water Energy. And if you're already playing Water Energy, you're a water deck, I guess, right? Unless you're playing Rainbows and just happen to squeeze in a 1-1 Frostlass line. If you're doing that, you're not searching out the Frostlass easily at all. So, yes, it can one-shot a Reshizard, but, I think overall, it's usually just too poor in general. I think it's hard to find Frostlass unless you commit a, lot of spaces to your deck towards it in multiple copies, and then it's only good against potentially 2 matchups. That said, I do throw my hands up and say I probably want to be playing Fire at Worlds. I think the Fire stuff is just so tempting and strong. But that said, I don't think it's necessarily worth teching Frostlass. I don't think you have enough space, and I don't think many decks have the option in general because, once again, it already takes that water cost, so life gets difficult for you. Bitter-sized attack you would build around, if anything. You put damage counts on yourself and do 20 times the amount that you put on him, up to 7 counters, so that's like the idea, to get a big one-shot on some of these these water-weak fire types. But overall, I think it's a pretty poor and overhyped card. It's too narrow, in my opinion. Next up, we have Keldeo GX. This has the Holy Heart ability, preventing all damage and effects of attacks done to this Pokemon by attacks of your opponent's GX and EX. So it's the reprint, essentially, of Scoundrel Guard. This time it is in GX form, of course, so it means you can Power Plant to shut down this Keldeo, but at the same time, this is a very, very annoying ability for people to play around. Sonic Edge does 110 for 2 water and a colorless. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, so you get through whatever you want and just keep spamming 110 damage or whatever. You also have the Resolute Blade GX attack for 2 water and a colorless. You do 50 times the amount of each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so it's similar to Lycanroc's GX attack, Dangerous Rogue, this time for a slightly more expensive attack cost. It's obviously much, much more expensive for water now that you have lost Aqua Patch, so this is a very slow card to build up to, but the simple statement is that there might be a handful of decks at Worlds where they're very tag team focused or they're very GX focused. They only play a handful of non-GX attackers in the first place. They don't play any power plants, and if you just play 4 Keldeo in your deck and a bunch of healing options, you will get through their 1 or 2 non-GXs. Some people will play Brock's Grit, but a lot of people won't want to because Brock is very slow and bad. People won't be able to recycle their non-GX attacker. You'll eventually Sonic Edge your way through them, or just use one big Resolute Blade GX attack and get through their non-GX answer, be it, like a Turtonator in Clowns, or like a even Turtonator in like Reshizard or something, an Arcanine, or whatever else it is. Like, whatever their non-GX tech answer is, you get through it eventually, you whittle them down, you slowly attach your way up to this Keldeo, and you just say, well, what now? How do you deal with this Keldeo? And a lot of people won't have the answers. The reason why I think this will still be kept in check is I think Malamar will have the answers, because they have Infinite Giratina, and I think Infinite Giratina will eventually get through these Keldeos. They only have 170 hit points. They can use things like Spell Tags, Distortion Doors, and all those shenanigans to slowly grind out the Keldeo. I also think there'll just be non-GX decks in general that you can use. And again, Keldeo will start struggling against those. So I think that's the biggest headache for Keldeo. And of course, if people are actually taking Power Plant, life gets very scary. If you play, 2 copies of Power Plant, you might be able to just push through the Keldeo easily enough and win the game off of that. But there's definitely a potential for Quad Keldeo to just be a deck at Worlds. If people want to turn up to the tournament and be like, I don't even want to play the game, I'm just going to try and win the matchup roulette and get through Day 1 Worlds that way. Sure, some people will slip through the net if people aren't teching for it. But there's also the potential for this being like the new face of Quagnag. Many people have said Quagnag is a dead archetype now, myself included. I think the search of this deck is, depleted completely, and it makes life much harder for Quagnag. But if you have Keldeos, you can sometimes buy yourself 2, 3, 4 turns. If Keldeo's sat in the active, that gives you turns to scramble around and find yourself Woopers and Poipoles and slowly evolve up and then build towards this washout, charging up approach. And then it is very difficult for your opponent to start getting through you. So maybe not a Quad Keldeo, maybe it's Quagnag that ends up playing Keldeo and buying yourself turns to counterbalance the inconsistency that you now have in the deck. Similarly, for the Slowduck archetype, maybe you just play 1 Keldeo in the list to be like, well, it's my Hail Mary, everything else has failed, let's put a Keldeo active and try and win the game off of that. So I'm definitely wary of Keldeo. I know there's the potential of people just bringing Quad Keldeo to the tournament, and I definitely don't want to see that myself. That's definitely something I want to be prepared for and have a number of non-GX attackers in the deck, / have Brock's Grit to recycle them, / have Power Plant as well. Any of those options, make sure you're playing a high count of Power Plant, otherwise they will still get through you with their own counter stadiums and whatnot. But overall, I think Keldeo is a scary card and one that you should be aware of for Worlds for sure. Next up, we have Lapras. Lapras has the Mermaid Call ability that lets you recycle Misty's request once per turn from your discard pile, essentially turning Misty's request into having the text of a Kahili on there, which is quite fun. Imagine you're flipping heads on Kahili the whole time with Misty's, and this is literally in here to just help out the Slow Duck deck. Essentially, this sort of fun rogue archetype will probably be playing 3 or 4 Lapras. You're going to try and bench them, you're going to use Slow Duck to discard a bunch of Misty's, then during your next turn, Lapras will gather them all back. Or you can use a Misty on that turn, search your deck for more supporters, and then Lapras can get the Misty back as well. So it's recurring damage. It's the Weavile Eggs approach, where in this case the Misty is the recovery piece that you can continually get value from thanks to having these Lapras on the board. So if you are trying to play Slow Duck, Lapras is the man. You could also consider this as being a end-proofing, well, reset stamp proofing mechanic. If you just play 1 Lapras in any random deck, and you just play like 2 Misties in any random deck, and you get hit with a reset stamp for like 1 or 2 cards, you could then just be like, okay, Mermaid Call, even if you can't win this turn, you can Misties and go ahead and grab yourself like a Cynthia for next turn to try and win the game and whatnot. So that's a fun thing. I think overall Misties is too slow to be truly a good reset stamp proofing mechanic. But I think it's like guaranteed in the Slow Duck fun archetype. Let's talk about that in more detail now. I have referred to it as Weavile Eggs. It's very similar in functionality, where Vilify from the old Weavile would dump a bunch of Pokemon, plus any executes that you could to get one-shots. It's a very similar story for Slow Duck. And let me tell you, Slow Duck's damage output is certainly not the problem with this deck. It is a big one-hit KO merchant. Do not get that twisted. This guy, don't be like muddled up by the artwork or the Pokemon themselves. Ditch and Splash is silly damage if you build your deck around having a bunch of supporters. My only issue with this archetype is that because you need so many spaces to be supporters, it means you can't play gusting effects. You can't play custom catchers. You only have a few spaces for heal cards, like a couple great potions at most. And because you're using unconventional supporters in the deck, like Misty's, a lot of the time you can just be sat there with 1 or 2 basics or something, and your opponent just one-hit KOs a Slow Duck, and then you're sort of stuck a little bit. So I think the damage output is definitely scary. I've built around this. I've played a lot of games with Slow Duck. I really enjoy its ability to beat other tag team decks because it just has the reach that you need. But it is so unconventional of a build that life gets a little bit scary for it. Ditch and Splash is 40, discarding any supporters from your hand, and you do 40 damage for each you discarded in this way. I've already talked about the Lapras, I've already talked about the Misties. Literally, my list plays like 28 or 29 supporter cards, and that takes up literally like half the deck. And you are literally just trying to use these strange supporters like Lieutenant Surge, Whitney, Misties, Lance Prism Star, these sorts of supporters, a bunch of fan clubs, stuff like that, to get your setup rolling, and then just you end up having so many supporters in your hand that you just dump them, and you use these Laprases to get the Misties back the entire time, and obviously Misty tutors them out of the deck as well. Think of Misty as 160 damage if you play it on your turn and then Lapras it back. If you think just having 1 Misty in your hand, or even just not having a hand at all, if you have no hand, you can still use Mermaid's Call full times, so that's 4, 8, 12, 16, and then you play a Misty for turn, which then gives you an additional 2 supporters total. If you pull 3 supporters out, then you have 7 in your hand. That's from a 0-card hand, going to 240 damage. So Ditch and Splash is silly damage. It really is out of control damage. If you're up against tag teams, it's busted. If you're not up against tag teams, or if they're just a tag team deck that can then, send up non-GXs and just poke around you a little bit, it just becomes horrible, and that's where the deck crumbles. That's why I think it's only going to be a rogue deck. I really like it. Again, it's one of these things that I'll profile pretty early on because I've tested it with a lot, and I really do like how it's turned out for what it can achieve, but at the end of the day, it's still a rogue that won't succeed at Worlds in my book. There's also the Thrilling Times GX attack, which I've used a couple times, It does 10, flip a coin if heads, you do 100 more damage, and just if you can one-shot, like, a Jirachi or something, just on those opening turns, it's fine. Like, if you're trying to build up Ditch and Splash for a big knockout on a tag team, and you don't want to burn supporters if you haven't found your Laprases yet or whatever, you can try and just flip a coin, and if you get heads, you knock out a Jirachi or whatnot. Don't just laugh at Thrilling Times. You'll use it in a lot of games, funnily enough. So, yeah, I've talked a lot about Slow Duck already. I'm passionate about it because I tried it out a lot, but I haven't quite been able to crack it, unfortunately. Next up, we have Tapu Fini. This is essentially exactly going to be used as a tech card. If you are concerned about Blacephalon for Worlds, we have its second attack, Nature Wave. For water colorless, you do 100 damage. But if your opponent has any Ultra Beasts in play, the attack cost is just a single colorless energy. So the idea is you use Tapu Fini on the turn that you're going to activate Beast Rings. Then you take a knockout on a Blacephalon, you get a nice up trade, and at the same time, your opponent not only has to find backup attackers and Beast Rings and the next Blacephalon or whatever else, they have to go through this Tapu Fini threat because, you know, otherwise it's going to keep coming back into the active and getting more and more Nature Wave value that they can't defeat. And essentially, you skew the prize trade with exactly one Tapu Fini. So if you want to have a favorable Blounds matchup at Worlds, try adding in a Tapu Fini. Yes, a one-of is fine. The search ability is the biggest headache here. And also the fact is you're taking one slot out of your deck for Worlds for exactly one matchup. But if you think about adding in, like, you're adding in a Mew for Worlds because it's helping you out against Pikarom, maybe you can then think, well, if I'm winning Pikarom and then I add another card into my deck to win against Blounds, maybe that means I win enough matchups that if I just have good matchups against the other decks that I expect in the format, maybe I'm going to do okay. So Tapu Fini, a tech card that we definitely might be seeing at Worlds if people are hyped on Blacephalon or hyped on countering it. It's a very annoying non-GX that they can't ignore, or if they are going to try and like gust around the Tapu Fini, you get value all over again for the following turn, and it will spiral out of control for them. So I think it's a great tech card for exactly Blacephalon, but that's really all it is here for. Next up, we have Electros. It's a stage 2 that, once again, loves to cheat its way into play. It has 150 hit points and this ability, Electric Swamp. If this Pokemon is in your hand and you have 4 lightning energies in play, you can use this. You can simply put him from your hand onto your bench, and if you do, you may move as many lightning energy from this from your Pokemon to this Pokemon as you like. So he can be thrown into play all at once, swoop up a bunch of energy from your other stuff, and then you can start using its Hover Over attack for a lightning and 3 colorless. You do 130. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat, which is a little nice attack here. Once again, good for knocking out non-GXs. If you think Pikarom has a bad matchup against some of these like non-GX threats, things like Giratina and stuff, obviously Electros has 150 hit points and can do 130, so it's a little bit annoying for things like Malamar. And obviously you can just come into the active all at once after you've used a full blitz, or if you use Dance of the Ancients or whatnot. It may even be the new face of the Vikavolt deck, where you simply use Vikavolt as your engine to get the charge bugs out, and then spam Electros to do 130 turn by turn, which could be quite fun. So I think he might be like the replacement Aerotrail for Tapu Koko. Overall, I think he's probably too weak for my Pikarom builds. His damage output just isn't good enough. But do bear in mind, you do have Electro Power, so 130 isn't like the end of the story. You can use Electro Powers to knock out the Denes, or you can knock out Ultramally or Blown or whatever. So he could be a non-GX that can swing some matchups that your opponent has to go through once again. But he commits 4 energy to himself, which is really expensive. You can only use him really like mid to late game once you've already used a full blitz in the first place. So your board already has to be nicely set up for you to be able to get any value out of him. That's why he's only really worth a 2-star in my book. Next up, we have Raichu and Alolan Raichu Tag Team GX. I really like this card. It has 260 hit points. It's a lightning type. It has Fighting Weakness and 2 attacks. Tandem Shock for Lightning. Lightning colorless does 80. And if this Pokemon was on the bench and became your active this turn, you do 80 more damage, and your opponent's active is now paralyzed. Paralysis is no joke post-rotation. Acerola's gone, Guzma's gone, decks are limited to Tantalizer and Switch now, and they have to have it on the turn, otherwise your opponent can be trapped, and you can really punish them for that. If you're setting up 2 hit KOs against tag team decks, paralyzing them is absolutely amazing. Getting a free turn is nuts, and it's really easy to power up Raichu if you are a Pikarom-based deck, because we have Full Blitz already, and we have, you know, Tag Switch, and we have Tapu Koko and all that good stuff. It's really, really easy to get this guy rolling, and I think he's just a staple in Pikarom, to be honest. He gets that 4-star rating immediately because I think he's at least a 1-of in Pikarom, probably a 2-of actually, because Tandem Shock is so important. I really think Paralysis is nuts. 160 damage is good vanilla for 2-shotting tag teams, and it's just so important to be able to do that. It also has the Lightning Ride GX attack that does 150 for that same attack cost. You switch this Pokemon with one of your benched, and if this Pokemon has at least 2 extra lightning attached to it, you do 100 more damage. So 250, again, you have things like Electro Power to help yourself push even more. This is really good against tag team Pokemon once again. So Alolan Raichu and Raichu is just amazing in tag team matchups because you're either trying to aim for 2 shots with Tandem Shock, or you can do things like Full Blitz and whatever. If your opponent has a Mew in play, they're playing around Tag Bolt, you can then just say, okay, cool, I will tag switch onto Raichu and, you know, slam down an Electro Power and Lightning Ride for 270 or 280 or whatever, and take a huge 3-prize knockout turn. So this card is amazing for those 3-prize decks where you're trying to slow him down in the first instance, and then you're trying to win the game off of his second attack. That's the whole idea around this card. Definitely worth including in the Pikarom. So easily searchable with Cherish and Electro Radar anyway, that he just gives you immense value. I'm really sold on this card, and I think Pikarom is a definite contender for Worlds. Really, really strong, just because it has Radar searchability and really good speed still. I'm definitely going to be considering Pikarom one of the strongest decks going into Worlds. Next up, we have Stunfisk. He's kind of like a little bit late to the party. He's a Lightning-type Pokemon with a Fighting-type attack cost. Trap Bolt does 30, and if your opponent's active has more hit points than you, you do 30 more damage. So he comes in as a Fighting-type answer to Zapdos, just as Zapdos starts getting a lot worse. So if you are a fighting deck, possibly think about adding this in if you are still plagued by Zapdos and find him a difficult card to get around. Other than that, I can't really say much for him. Overall, too late to the party. If it came out in the previous set, maybe you could think differently about him, but for now, I think Zapdos is probably on the decline for Worlds, now that we have lost Guzma. Kind of like the biggest deal for Zapdos was just spamming Guzma all the time. Now, that's no longer the case. It's a lot less easy to spam Thunderous Assault as much as you would want to these days. So Stunfisk, a little bit late to the party. Next up, we have a Tapu Koko. He is another basic Lightning-type Pokemon that you have to bear in mind. It has Electro Ball for 30 for 1 Lightning, but then we have the Nature Drive attack for Lightning, Lightning, Colorless. You do 100. If your opponent's active is an Ultra Beast, you do an additional 100 and then discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. The idea is very similar. Go into a Beast Ring turn, taking a GX knockout with a non-GX, and force your opponent to not only find their Beast Rings, but also find a Gust effect that turn. Otherwise, you force an unfavorable prize trade against them because you're able to swing. Lightning types can easily accelerate to 3 energies. That's not a problem, as we know. So if you want to improve your Cephalon matchup or your Beast Box matchup, Tapu Koko could be an include into things like Pikarom or whatnot. Overall, I think he's too difficult to search in a vacuum because, you know, one of the only things we can't find is basic non-GX Pokemon. They're really hard to search in this game. So I think he's a little bit too difficult to get at the right moments to take advantage of him. But the premise is still there that he can be a nice counter to Ultra Beasts in general. Next we have Xurkitree, another very interesting Ultra Beast Pokemon here. Basic Lightning type, 120 hit points. It has the 3 Mirrors attack. For 1 Lightning, you do 30, and if your opponent's Pokemon has exactly 3 prize cards remaining, you do 90 more damage. Sound familiar? Well, that's because it's Sledgehammer, but on a different amount of prize cards. So that's the whole sort of process of Xurkitree. The idea is, if we are still ever going to have a sort of non-GX toolbox deck, we can try and now fill the curve with not only Xurkitree, but also Buzzwole, also Nihilego, and essentially just use as many Ultra Beasts like we are able to, turn by turn, to have these big power spike moments. The big benefit of Xurkitree instead of Buzzwole, or like as well as him, is that 3 Mirrors isn't just capped at 120, of course, because we have Electro Power as well. So if we're going to try and build New Age Zapdos, although I do think it's a lot worse, now that we don't have Guzma, and we don't have Escape Rope either, we can at least add in more Ultra Beasts. I think the outlook of the deck will now be probably like 2 copies of Zapdos, but then, you know, Buzzwole, Xurkitree, Nihilego, Spiritomb, Kartana, Buzzmosa, like a whole plethora of attackers, with Zapdos simply being the early game option, because Xurkitree with E-Power, easily able to knock out some basic GXs, and also can like set up that 2-shot for tag teams as well. So staying as an annoying non-GX, Xurkitree really joins the fray as an extra nice Ultra Beast option on key turns. Similar to the Tapu Koko that I talked about on the last slide, I think is a little bit too awkward to find in the first instance to be added into something like Pikarom, unless you are really lurking for non-GX attackers. But I think if you're trying to make a full-on non-GX deck, obviously this is an Ultra Beast, so I think Zapdos is probably going to go down the Ultra Space route to search out all these things at the right time. You could try and look for this card for sure. We move on to the Psychic type, starting off with a Stage 2 Aegislash. I talked about this a little bit already with the Rescue energy, but he has the ability Undying Sword. If this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, put it into your hand instead. So instead of just your Stage 2 hitting the discard pile, it all comes back to you. So the concept of this deck is once you get your first Aegislash rolling, it's easy to just chain Aegislash for the rest of the game. It's a very low maintenance deck once you get that initial Aegislash online, and you have the Rubble/attack. Again, one colorless, very easy, very low maintenance, very easy to just chain attacks throughout the entire game. Once you get into that board state, you do 10, and you do 10 times the amount of item cards in your discard pile, going up to a maximum of 130 damage. So 130, not quite enough to two-shot tag teams, but we do have Spell Tag to help you push onto things like Reshizard or Mewtwo if they're playing Jirachi, GX, which I'll talk about later on. So we have Spell Tag to make life a little bit easier. 130 again, it's a good vanilla baseline for other non-GX attackers out there. And Recycle Energy plus Aegislash means that you simply do it over and over again. You rinse and repeat. You're very much doing the same thing every single game. And the question then becomes, is doing 130 damage every turn good enough alongside Spell Tag in a non-GX deck? I would argue no. I think there are too many things that can go wrong. You can miss Dust Stone and not attack on turn 2. Your Rubble/Slash may not reach 130 by turn 2. In fact, it's quite likely that it won't reach the full damage output. And although you only need to require a small amount of energy cards, that entail comes with some downsides of missing energy in those opening stages. The idea around the Aegislash, because you need to get Rubble/Slash working as quickly as possible, is you need to pack your deck with the likes of Acrobikes, Pokénavs, Judge Whistles, lots of insta-play cards that just thin the deck as quickly as possible, whilst also increasing your damage output. And that's what starts becoming awkward, because you have to play some cards that aren't necessarily all that strong, just to try and make the Rubble/Slash do decent output. So I think it's very similar to something like Alolan Exeggutor, the non-GX, where in theory you can reach 130 and just be a two-shot deck and a non-GX that recycles itself infinitely, and Spell Tag can make things easy for you, but at the same time things can go wrong. Alolan Eggs has the same thing. In theory you can shuckle an attack and suddenly you're doing 120 every turn with a 160 hit point stage 1, but too many things can go wrong for it to be a simple chain of affairs, really. So I think overall Aegislash is probably just not doing enough damage output, or not as consistently as something like a Psychic Malamar deck could do. If you just want to chain Giratina, like, you basically have the same ability as Aegislash, but you're also getting extra damage counters on top of that, and you're a basic, and Malamar has the option to play more tech Pokemon, so it's more, it has more tricks up its sleeve than just Rubble/Slash every single turn. So yeah, I think you set your stall out with Aegislash and hope that 130 from like turn 2 or 3 is good enough, but overall I don't think it is. Next up we have Beheeyem. This is also a card of intrigue for a lot of people. It's a Stage 1 Psychic type that has the attack Mystery Noise, which is its main selling point. For 3 colors you do 90, and you shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. Your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand during their next turn. Item Lock coming back, this time not quite the same as TikTok Lock that we saw from Cryogonal. Now it's a lot more damage. 90 damage is definitely a big chunk. You're trying to make life difficult for the opponent for sure. But I think where this card falls down is 2 reasons. First of all, although we are a Psychic type, we have Mysterious Treasure and whatnot, it's still difficult to chain Beheeyem's every single turn, no matter what you're doing. Because you do shuffle yourself back in or whatnot, it gets difficult for you. Yes, you can use 3 CE, and that will also get shuffled back in with the Beheeyem, so you have infinite energies, I guess, but it's not guaranteed that you'll find your next attacker for the following turn. That's the first issue I have, because there's not enough Ball Search to supplement that. And my second issue is simply, what wall do you go into? What's the best option for you? There's things like the new Keldeo, the Sigilyph, the Xurkitree. There are some good walls out there, don't get me wrong, but all the walls, like the good walls, like Keldeo, Sigilyph, Xurkitree, they all have a 2 retreat cost. So pivoting into them isn't all that easy. If you want to have lower retreat cost things, the Goomy, the Shuckle, the Aerodactyl, they're much more soft lock style Pokemon, and your opponent will be able to get around them in certain circumstances. And Beheeyem, although it will be item locking, frustrating the opponent, making life difficult for them to set up, I think the walls that you have on offer just aren't strong enough. So That's why I don't believe Behemoth will work. Never underestimate item luck, but right now, I think it's too awkward to get him rolling. Think about old Aselgor with deck and cover. The difference there was Trevenant was the means of locking. The deck and cover was just paralyzing to make it difficult for the opponent to ever attack at all. And at the same time, you weren't having to recycle a stage 1 every single time. You were trying to recycle a Mu EX, which is a basic that was much easier to find turn by turn by turn. This time, it is the stage 1 himself that you have to keep recycling, and our walls are just far, far inferior. Next up, we have Driftblim. It's an ability that has tag carry. Once during your turn, you may switch your active tag team Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. We have some chunky retreaters for tag teams, that's for sure. And there are some situations where that would be helpful. Think about Malamar decks having a guaranteed means of moving something like a Mew Mewtwo, which could be nice. Obviously, Flare Strike is not a chainable attack from Reshizard, so being able to pivot that out of the way could also be helpful. And of course, if you want to build around Raichu even more than just having it in Pikarom as a 1 or 2 of, if you want to build around it fully, you could have the tag carry, so you could use Zeraora to retreat, or you could use the tag carry to retreat Driftblim, and then use Thunderclap Zone to retreat whatever you moved into to get that same Raichu that was initially in the active back into the active to get the full effect of paralysis. So there are some situations for this card. Overall, though, it's just annoying that it's a stage 1. It's an annoying Psychic stage 1, non-GX, that's difficult to search out. Yes, we have Treasure, but is it really worth committing that much deck space for this option when you could just be playing Switches and Jirachis and Skateboards? Probably not. Next up, we have Espeon and Deoxys. It's an interesting tag team that has 260 hit points. It's a Psychic type that has 2 attacks. The first is Psychic Club, that does 10 base and 30 more for each of your benched Psychic Pokemon. So it's similar to Mind Jack, I guess, but it's on your own side of the field. So you can do a total of 160. 160 is a good number for knocking out exactly the Dene GX, which is something to be bearing in mind. But it does mean that you probably can't tech in things like Jirachi into a deck if you're trying to go fully focused on Espeon and Deoxys. That said, though, I don't think Espeon and Deoxys ever will shape up to the likes of Giratina or Ultra Necrozma as a front man. I don't think it has enough stopping power with Psychic Club. But that said, I am still interested in its GX attack Cross Division. For a Psychic in 2 colors, you put 10 counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Now, I've been trying out a lot of Ultra Necrozma recently in this current format. I've tried out a lot of Malamar in general, to be honest. I've been trying out Ultra, I've been trying out Tina Chomp, and I've been trying out just a non-GX Giratina with a heavy spell tag. And I want to talk about the Tina tag list most here, because that build will only be playing probably something like 8 or 9 Psychic Energies, and that's where Espeon and Deoxys could shine as a one-of, just as your finisher. You have spell tags already, you have Distortion Door already, and Cross Division GX could just be your finishing blow to end up knocking out something that you've set up damage with on the bench without relying on having to find double custom catcher for game. So it could be a great way to just close out the game without needing to have a split of energy cards alongside Ultra Necrozma. Because Ultra Necrozma basically takes up like at least 3 slots in your deck. I would say you'd play a minimum of 2 Metal and 1 Ultra in your deck. Even then you have even more of a headache of prizing things and whatnot. And that can be a little bit awkward for space-wise. But if you want to be a pure non-GX Tina tag build and drop the Espeon Deoxys late game to just Cross Division, 10 counters is a lot when you already have Distortion Door throughout the game and spell tags. So that could be a great way to just close the game out. And that's the only reason why I'm giving this a 2-star. I think if you're Ultra Necrozma, you never play this. I think if you're Mewtwo, Mally, you don't play this. I think if you're the Tina Chomp Mally, you don't play this. I think I'm giving it a 2-star for exactly its potential in a pure Psychic-based build that's predominantly trying to just spam Distortion Door and Spell Tag as much as possible. On to another Giratina that we have in the set. It's a 130 hit point Psychic Basic with Dimension Talon. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may discard a special energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's the Slice Off ability that we have from Kartana GX previously. Obviously that Kartana is rotating. Now we have it in a non-GX form. And Giratina, surprisingly enough, only has a 1 retreat cost. Seeing as though the old Giratina has a 3 retreat cost, for whatever reason, this one's a lot cheaper. It might be a different Giratina form, to be honest. But yeah, searchable means of removing special energies, kind of cool. But what special energies are there right now? 3 CE discards itself. That's probably the most relevant one that you would want to get rid of if you could. So really, it's looking at things like Recycle Energy, which would already go back to your opponent's hand, and things like Weak Guard Energy. Weak Guard Energy might be the outlier here. If Psychic Pokemon didn't have Jirachi GX, possibly this would see play to remove Weak Guard Energies, but unfortunately, they do have the Jirachi GX, which I'll talk about later. So for that purpose, 1 star for Giratina. Here is the Jirachi GX. It has the ability Psychic Zone. If a Pokemon with a Psychic weakness receives damage from an attack, don't apply weakness. Bear in mind, it doesn't say your Pokemon with Psychic weakness. It just says, in general, any Pokemon with weakness of Psychic receives damage, don't apply weakness. So you're helping your opponent out in general if you're playing this in your own Psychic-based deck. But the biggest deal here is you're defending yourself against Psychic Pokemon. Mew and Mewtwo has a lot of potential. It's a phenomenal card, but it has a horrible weakness to Psychic, which makes life very awkward when you're looking down things like Distortion Door, Giratina. It can just simply one-shot you if you've Distortion Doored the Mewtwo earlier, or if you spell tagged onto it or whatever. That's just way too scary for Mew and Mewtwo. So this Jirachi GX is a godsend for that sort of archetype to really make it less of a Achilles heel for the deck. Bear in mind, of course, then the Achilles heel of the deck becomes things like Power Plants, which is very scary. People may already be incentivized to play Power Plant for Worlds for the likes of the Keldeo GX coming out. So definitely something to bear in mind. But I do believe Jirachi will probably make its way into most heavy Mew Mewtwo based builds, so that you don't just fold to the likes of Malamar and to the likes of Beast Box as well, because they have that Beast Raid attack, which is also very scary for you, even though it doesn't one-shot the Mew and Mewtwo unless they have Beast Energy and a full bench. You're still worried because of things like Spell Tag that they could be playing. Jirachi also comes with a couple of attacks. It has Star Search, Psychic, search your deck for an energy, and attach it to one of your Psychic Pokemon. I think this is reasonable. You know, if you just start Jirachi and go first or whatever, go second, you may end up just using this to thin a card out of your deck, and it means you can pay Retreat of Jirachi next turn. And it also has the Star Shield attack. For Psychic, 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 you do 100 and prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. The idea being very similar to a Moon's Eclipse GX attack, where you get 100 damage for free, basically. You force your opponent to Gust on you, try and combine this with a Reset Stamp, make it awkward for your opponent, get 100 damage onto the board, and just say, I'll try and win the game next turn by Malamaring the rest of the energies onto something like a Mew and Mewtwo and taking a big swing. Also bear in mind that Mew and Mewtwo can simply copy this. If you've got Jirachi in play, you can just do it on the Mew Mewtwo that's active, get that 100 damage, prevent all effects done to you next turn, and then you keep that energy for a big, I don't know, Ultra Necrozma swing for next turn and just win the game. That's kind of the cool options that you have with Jirachi. I think it's more or less a staple if you're playing heavy Mew and Mewtwo. Like if you're playing at least 2 Mew Mewtwo, you're probably playing Jirachi. The downside of this card really is that you just have 160 hit points, so it's like having more Dedenes in play, more easy targets for Gust, which is the biggest issue of this card. Next up we have a Latios GX. I give credit to this card simply for an option in Mew Mewtwo based builds. You could potentially play it in a pure Malamar based build, like a Psychic Mally, kind of toolboxy build, but overall I think it's more often than not going to be a card that you copy with Mew and Mewtwo. It has its own ability, Power Bind. If you have 4 or less Pokemon in play, this Pokemon can't attack, so it's a bit of a nerf in its own ability, so you need to have a full board to use him, but obviously Mew and Mewtwo isn't plagued with that ability. And then it has the Tag Purge attack. For Psychic in 2 colors, you do 120. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon can't be damaged by attacks from Tag Team Pokemon. Tag teams are dominating the format, I've already mentioned that. Pikarom seems very strong. Mew, Mewtwo, Mirrors are going to be a thing. Reshizard is going to be a thing at World. These are all, flagship decks in the format that we have to bear in mind. And being able to just say, no, you can't hit me unless you use something like a Channeler, which no one will do, in my opinion. That could be an awesome way that you really make life difficult for the opponents. You also have the Clear Vision GX attack for a Psychic. Until the end of the game, your opponent can't use a GX attack. So essentially you're saying both players flip over their GX. GX attacks are no longer relevant in the game. And once again, this could be really annoying for some decks that really do rely on on GX attacks. You could deny like a Welder Double Blaze. You could deny Tag Bolt. You can deny even the, is it Tandem Shock or whatever the Raichu one is as well. So Latios, I think, it's like a nice early game GX attack option. You probably don't use it all that much unless you're super petrified of your opponent doing one against you. But the Tag Purge is the big selling point here. Get a Latios in the discard pile, copy it with Mew and Mewtwo, make life awkward for any other tag team based deck. So we get on to the Mew and Mewtwo GX slide. Honestly, I wish I could put more on this slide. I wish I had more space, because there are plenty of options people are going to be trying out with Mew and Mewtwo. This card is very versatile, and once again, an easy 5-star in my opinion, because there will be some combination that makes this card very, very strong. As mentioned earlier, it's a 270 hit point Psychic Pokemon with Psychic Weakness, but we can remove this with Jirachi, thank goodness. It has the ability Perfection. This Pokemon can use the attacks of any GX Pokemon or EX on your bench or in the discard pile. So I talked earlier about things like Hapu, Acrobike, and all that good discard synergy shenanigans. Mewtwo can definitely take advantage of that. Throw different Pokemon into your discard pile, and suddenly you can copy those attacks. That means essentially Mewtwo can cheat evolution. He can use the attacks of these Stage 2 Pokemon if you just simply throw them in the bin, which is really easy to do when you have things like Cherish Ball into Big Oven, if you're playing a Welder-based build, Cherish Ball into Viridian Forest, if you're playing a Malamar-based build, even things like Hapu, Acrobike, Mysterious Treasure, all these different options to bin Pokemon, or if they are just a basic, simply put them into play and then copy them with Perfection as well, which is really cool. So, very versatile, plenty of routes you can try and take with this card. It also has its own GX attack, Miraculous Duo GX. For Psychic Colors, you do 200, simply like flat damage. But if you have an additional energy attached, you can heal all damage from all of your Pokemon. So if you have 4 energies total, not only can you sponge a hit with this guy and spam like the best attacks out there, you can then completely heal not only him, but your entire board at the same time, making spread pretty redundant in the format, which is awesome, and undoing like spell tag cute math that people have tried to set up or whatnot throughout the game as well, get you out of range of maybe like Ultra Necrozma doing some Sky Scorching Light shenanigans. So that GX attack is definitely one that you have to bear in mind, and is really, really strong. Just a handful of the Stage 1 and 2s that I've kept my eye out for, that I've seen a few people trying to combine with this Mewtwo. Things like Greninja and Kingdra, using Haze Slash to shuffle in your Mewtwo back into your deck to essentially like undo damage that you received can be nice. Only requiring 1 water energy in there and 2 colorless. Kingdra being able to do Maelstrom, 40 to each of your opponent's Pokemon, can be really scary if they haven't evolved up a bunch of their 60 hit point stuff. If they're going to be an Elm-based build, you can try and do that like 40 to everything and then set up other snipe damage. If you have, maybe if you're a more full-on water-based deck, you could even use something like a Volcanion Prism Star to do that 100 to the active and 20 to everything on the bench. Come in with a Kingdra afterwards, that would be super scary. Even Hydro Pump does good damage if you're a full-on water-based attacking deck. There's also the Shadowy Hunter GX attack from Greninja. A 130 snipe is not to be laughed at. Again, if you're a Psychic-based attacker with Mewtwo, you can use spell tags to your advantage and then Shadowy Hunter to knock out things like Dedenne, or even you could knock out just things like Malamars in that sort of matchup, whatever else it is, or other non-GXs like Ninetales or Salazzle, those sorts of things to bear in mind, which is pretty cool. There's both Solgaleos. These Stage 2s both have good energy acceleration. Soulburst GX obviously being insane energy excel. Sunsteel Strike not being too shabby either for 230 damage and discard all energies from him. And then there's also Turbo Strike, 120, and then attaching 1 energy from discard to your Pokemon. That's always something to bear in mind. If you're hitting through non-GXs quite casually, you can get additional energy acceleration on top of that. Altaria has that really annoying first attack that does 50, and you prevent all damage done to you by GXs and EXs, so similar to the Latios, but even more versatile there. So trying to wall out these cards is really annoying. Dragonite can do a big one-hit KO. We'll talk about that later. But overall, I think you can see this the bottom slide here where I'm like, man, there's just so much versatility here. You can play a rainbow-based build. You can play Malamar. You can play Welder for acceleration. You can even play Mina for acceleration if you want to. So many ways of powering up this Mewtwo as quickly as possible and just trying to spam the best attacks in the game. That's what this card is all about. You can even use things like Stinger GX. We saw Stinger GX win the NAIC, basically, and a whole bunch of Zoroark decks were sort of given life thanks to Stinger, and now you can try and use it in a Mewtwo as well. Even that sounds really scary. Even using things like the Latias GX, just using its first GX attack to get a bunch of energies into play. There's so many options for this card. I think it's really, really versatile. I think there will definitely be a Malamar-based deck build around this, and then I think there'll be full-on like Welder builds, and I think there might even be just like stalling like Altaria Greninja based builds as well. So I think there's so many different directions for this card. It will succeed in some form, maybe multiple as well, because the card is so strong. If you think about it, just like if you're just playing one of this in Pika ROM, It means that now you can play a card in your deck that isn't weak to fighting. So if your opponent's trying to play fighting answers like a Baby Buzzwole, you could use Mewtwo on that turn instead, and then just be like, oh, I have 30 more hit points than a Pikarom as well. So yeah, like you're just adding 30 hit points to a Pikarom. Like how is that ever bad? That's just an amazing card in general. So at the very least, you can be just giving yourself more hit points. At most, you can be stealing stage 2 attacks in multiple forms. So the card is just ridiculous. The options are out there. Someone's going to make it work. It's got to get creative. I've tried a few different builds myself. So far, I've tried mostly welder-based builds, because I think intuitively that's the thing that makes the most sense to me, alongside Malamar builds. So I think that's where the power will lie, mostly for Mewtwo, but there's just so many options that I can't write anything off just yet. We move on to Uxie. Let's lower the excitement levels real quick. It has the ability Secret Territory. If you have a Mesprit and Azelf in play, apply weakness for each Pokemon as ×4 instead of ×2. So as I mentioned earlier, there's things like Reshizard and Pikarom and Mewtwo. They hate being up-traded on by little non-GXs, and that's kind of the deck you'll try and build around with this little Pixie-based build. I picked out a couple examples for those 3 tag teams I just mentioned. Mesprit can Mind Splash, Articuno can use its attack, and Landorus can also use Power Cyclone. All of these attacks, when you times them by 4, will take knockouts on the respective tag teams that they hit for weakness on. So that's pretty funny. The idea is you're going to be a non-GX sort of toolbox, trying to get the most value out of these things that just poke for 70 or 60 or whatever else. And yeah, take one-hit heroes with non-GXs. That's the whole intention of the deck. Overall, probably a little bit too clunky. You probably have to play too many random attackers, and if you face any other non-GX deck, you probably just lose outright. So yeah, have fun trying to play this wacky combo deck. Aerodactyl GX is a fighting type fossil, which again, we've talked about the fossil mechanic, now coming with a new stadium card. He has 210 hit points and this very great ability, Prehistoric Wind. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, the attacks of your opponent's basic cost 1 colorless more. So it's the sticky membrane ability of Goomy, but this time it's on a much bigger body. As you can see, 210 hit points is much more spongy if you just want to pivot in and out of him as like a hit and run style approach. He also has free retreat, which is insane, and it comes with 2 attacks. Rock Smash for a fighting in 2 colors does 120. This is obviously pretty good for you. You are one-shotting a Pikarom, you're one-shotting Zeraora, you're 2-shotting most non-GXs. A little bit awkward that you can't one-shot Giratina or Zapdos without the help of Diancie at the very least. So that's a bit of a shame. But in general, you're 2-shotting most tag teams, especially if you have Diancie to help you out there. And you also have the Wild Dive GX attack for a fighting. You do 50 times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Obviously, there's amazing synergy here. You have Prehistoric Wind to force them to attach more energy cards if they're any like big basic deck. And then you have the GX attack that can instantly punish them. If they go to get like 5 energies onto a Zard, you can hit them for 270 for 1 energy. If they have those 5 energies plus Diancie, you just take a big swing knockout and they've lost all that commitment. Your next Aerodactyl is in the active, and even if they like weld or attach, they just have to hit you for 30 with Outrage because of your own ability. So the idea is he could be very annoying for non-GX, or sorry, for tag team basics and all that big basic shenanigan style archetypes. He could be very annoying. I think he's definitely got a pretty powerful Pikarom matchup thanks to that big one-hit KO potential. It's got a pretty strong Reshizard as well, in my opinion. So that's, you know, a lot of boxes checked out the gate, which is pretty nice. The main way I've been trying him is alongside Welder and Salazzle. Obviously, that attack cost is a little bit annoying now that we don't have DCE. So trying to use Welder, Salazzle, Ninetales, trying to give yourself that sort of busted engine, but in a fighting form is pretty interesting. The downside of the deck is you do have to try and fill it with things like these research labs and a bunch of unidentified fossils, so things can get a little bit scary. And also, of course, like you can't commit energies onto Aerodactyl if you're using the fossil lab turn 1. So sometimes he can be slow, especially if things come down in the wrong order. So I'm only giving him a 3-star. The potential, like he screams amazing potential for sure, and just boasting a strong Pikarom and possibly Reshizard matchup is insane. But it may not be strong enough to cover these other matchups that he could potentially be a lot worse against. Archeops is a stage 2, which already makes me a little bit skeptical. Additionally, he has the annoying fossil mechanic behind him, so try and build around him that way if you want to. He has 2 attacks. U-turn does 40, and switch this with one of your benched. Obviously, there's Diancie and things like Martial Arts Dojo as well, which can increase that damage output, but nothing too spectacular. Kind of a small upgrade to Hitmonchan. The other attack is much more interesting in my books. Hyper Beam does for 1 colorless 80 damage and discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. 100 with Diancie is reasonable pressure, especially if you have Dojo on top of that. And if you try and play things like Crushing Hammers alongside Hyper Beam, potentially you could slow down your opponent on turns here and there, and then still have Aerodactyl in the list for those U-turn moments where you've removed a bunch of energy, then you can buy yourself 3 turns of U-turning into the Aerodactyl, and then simply free retreat, pivot him back out when you need to. Overall, I think it's probably too clunky. I think trying to add in the Aerodactyl line and the Archeops line and the Jirachi and all this other stuff, it's just too much stuff. I think the damage output needs to be higher to be really strong, but removing energies is annoying for a lot of archetypes, and I think if we didn't have Welder in the format and if we didn't have Malamar, like those are the 2 archetypes that, like even Pikarom to an extent, obviously you have good weakness coverage against Pikarom, but if they use Zapdos against you, you're still kind of in a bad spot. All these cards are based on energy acceleration. Those are the strongest cards in the strongest decks in the format right now are all based on energy excel. So just using Hyper Beam to get rid of 1 isn't all that insane. We have Breloom. I've talked about this to death already, but just in more detail. 120 hit point, stage 1. Spore can send your opponent's active to sleep. That's a Hail Mary if everything goes to pot with the Mareeps. But you also have the Sleep Strike attack for a grass. You do 30. If your opponent's active is asleep, this attack does 90 more damage. So we do have grass Shroomishes, so we can try and use Netball to get these out into play early. Obviously, Netball can give us access to energies to attack with as well, so we don't necessarily need to play a high count of energies, which is nice. Maybe something like 9 or 10 total, with Brock's Grit as well as a fallback to get them back into the deck, as well as Breloom's. And you just try and use this UTurn Board Mareep combo with the Slumber Forest or whatever. That's the whole idea. You take 2 shots, whilst also your opponent wastes turns napping. Sometimes that's the big upside of the deck. I'm concerned about its consistency, even with Netball and Com and stuff. I'm just not convinced because you have to use Mareep instead of using things like Jirachi, which you would otherwise love to do. So that's the thing I'm most concerned about. I don't think it really has that consistency element behind it. Its damage output is just a little bit below the bar. 140 isn't quite enough to deal with stuff. Obviously, you can Gust and kill Dedenes in 1 hit, which is nice. You're doing good type coverage against Pikarom, but overall I'm not super impressed by this, just by the engine behind it. We have a Garchomp, and this is a pretty clunky Stage 2 fighting type. It has the Counter Aura ability. If you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, this Pokemon's attacks do 80 more damage to your opponent's active. It also has the Aura Edge attack. For fighting colorless, you do 80. You may discard an energy from this Pokemon. If you do, this attack does 40 more damage. How are we going to get this guy rolling? Is it going to be via Black Belts? Is it going to be via Welder plus a couple of fighting energy in the deck as well? I don't know. I think this is, again, just one of these annoying kind of Pokemon that's going to be too clunky post-rotation when we don't have enough Ball Search. You do have Treasure that can help you get Gibbles and Gabites, but the Garchomp himself is still a fighting type, which is annoying. There is Lucario to try and use Precognitive Aura here and there, and obviously your opponent will Gust Lucario a lot less in this format, so you get more turns of value out of it, which is nice, but overall I just think, yeah, too inconsistent, too reliant on being behind in the game, but it can do big damage if you really want to, but overall I'm not super convinced by this card. Feels a little bit too slow from me. Zygarde is a basic fighting type that has 90 hit points and has the ability Cell Company. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, your Zygarde's attacks, including the GX, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before applying weakness and resistance. Then it has the Fighting Boost Fang attack for 20. Attach a fighting energy from your discard to one of your benched Pokemon. Kind of similar to Raikou. I say that because, you know, the 20 damage, or in Raikou's case, the 30 damage vanilla isn't the end of the story, because Raikou could have Electro Powers. Zygarde can have more Cell Companies on the bench to increase that damage output even further, whilst also getting extra energy acceleration rolling, which is kind of cute. The idea is you're going to try and stack up big Zygarde GX in the back, whilst having the early pressure from this non-GX. Hopefully you can find your way into more non-GXs, so Cell Company and Boost Fang increases the damage output. So you're doing good pressure early and trying to build to this Zygarde. Zygarde is definitely worth building around, in my opinion, because Verdict is a really, really annoying attack post-rotation. There's so much limited Gust that preventing damage for return is insane. Even if your opponent is able to Gust around him or whatever, you still just keep your 4 energy committed to Zygarde, which is amazing. You can try and use Bonnie to reuse it as well, which is kind of cool. So a lot of people want to try out Zygarde. It's probably got a pretty favorable Pikarom matchup, which is a nice thing to boast. Verdict being buffed by Cell Company. If you have 2 Cell Companies in the back, Verdict is knocking out things like Ultra Necrozma, it's knocking out Blacephalon, all that good stuff. You're easily knocking out Dedenne thanks to weakness, even with things like Land's Wrath. Maybe even the non-GX Zygarde could do good damage against them. If you have all 4 Zygardes out, you could even use Boost Fang for a knockout against them, because you have the 3 on the bench buffing you to 80 damage, and Boost Fang hitting for weakness can knock one out, which is hilarious. So yeah, the idea is to try and get as many of these out as possible to try and swing the matchups and whatnot. Overall, I think Zygarde's still a little bit too slow. My biggest issue is finding the baby Zygardes. It's too difficult to find basic non-GXs these days, so you kind of have to high roll using like Bonnie or not Bonnie, using like Acrobikes and Hapus to dig through your deck early and find Zygardes, whilst also binning off fighting energies early to help you getting into the Boost Fang for big value. But overall, I don't see it being amazing, especially because you want to commit board spaces to Zygarde GX and Dedenne a lot of the time. You never really have the full value of Cell Company, so I think it's a bit of a trap. A lot of people are kind of hyped on this card, as you can see by the community ratings and stuff. I think it's a little bit below the power level overall, just because of the lack of consistency. Onto the dark stuff now. We have Hooper, 130 hit point Pokemon with 2 colorless attacks. The first is Evil Admonition, which sounds familiar. It does 10 and 20 more for each of your opponent's Pokemon that has an ability. A lot less damage than Weavile ever did, but it is on a basic, and it's a colorless attack cost this time around. And it has the Mind Shock attack. For 3 colors, you do 80, and this attack's damage isn't affected by weakness or resistance. I'm going to give this a 1-star. I'm very surprised by the community giving it such a high rating. I think the big selling point of Hooper is it's good against Malamar decks, because they will always fill their board of abilities for the most part, and Hooper has an annoying resistance to Psychic and 130 hit points, so it's not easy for Giratina to get through them, whereas Evil Admonition for 1 colorless attachment will always get through the Giratina army, which is nice. Sometimes you can get a couple turns of value with it, and life gets awkward for the Giratinas, but at the same time, I would foresee Giratina adding in spell tags and whatnot, so I think they could still get through the Hoopers easily enough. So I'm just going to rate this a 1-star. I don't see huge value in this. I'd like to be interested in why the community are more hyped on this card. Personally, I don't really see it. I think it's very poor. Fun anecdote though, way back when, I actually gave the Weavile 1-star initially, and boy, I was wrong on that one, so I wonder if the Hooper will be the same case. We move on to some interesting GXs for the Dark-type stuff. We start with Mega Sableye and Tyranitar. It's a big 280 hit point basic Pokemon, and that is massive. It is weak to fighting. It has a nice resistance to Psychic, which is annoying for people. And it has 2 attacks, both for 5 energy cards. Greedy Crush does 210. If your opponent's Pokemon GX or EX is knocked out by damage from this attack, take 1 more prize card. Now, take 1 more prize card is a very, very scary amount of text there. That is awkward for a lot of people. Imagine just going for 1 Greedy Crush, knock out a tag team after like setting up with something like Umbreon Darkrai or something, and then all you need to do to win the game is knock out 1 Dedenne. Like, imagine knocking out a tag team with this guy. Your opponent can't hit 280, most of the time they can't, and then you just go double custom catch it for game. You could essentially win in like 3 or 4 attacks. You could go start with Umbreon Darkrai, you Dark Moon GX to slow them down, then you go into Black Lance, you do 150 to the active tag team, 60 anywhere else, and then you just go use the Weavile GX to move your Dark Energies around, get into your Mega Sableye, Tyranitar, Greedy Crush that tag team for 4 prize cards, and then you'll just gust away on Dedenne for winning the game. That's the dream of this card. That's the main finisher for the Dark deck. He's the selling point. That's why we're building around the Dark archetype. You can see I'm giving it a 3-star because I believe this archetype will be a thing. I think overall you are a little bit fragile in the early game. That's why I'm not putting it higher on the list. But overall, I think this card is definitely a threat, and Greedy Crush is the main selling point of the Dark types. It also has the Giga Full GX attack, 250 for 5 energy. Again, just a hefty amount for sure. If you've used things like Black Lance from Umbreon Darkrai, that'll easily finish off even tag team Pokemon. Even then, Giga Full naturally knocks out things like Pikarom, which is amazing. If you have an additional 5 energy, this is where the meme comes in. You get to discard the top 15 cards of your opponent's deck. It'll rarely ever happen, but huge meme potential for whoever does that. The whole idea of getting towards this big attack cost is probably just going to be playing things like Naganadel. I've seen some people try and add in Sharpedo as well. I think overall he's pretty pathetic. I would always play Naga over him, but I think just having charging ups and Darkrai Prism Star probably enough to help you use the Weavile effectively to build up to this Mega Sableye once you've used Darkrai and Umbreon in those early turns. Let's talk about Darkrai and Umbreon in a bit more detail. 270 hit points for this guy also makes him pretty tanky. He has the same weakness and resistance as the Sableye, and he has this Black Lance attack. For dark colors, you do 150 and bench Pokemon, and 60 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon GX or EX. So the whole idea is, as mentioned earlier, you're going to set up bench tag teams whilst also hitting into the active, either a knockout on a basic, non-GX, or setting up, once again, tag teams or GX Pokemon pretty happily. You can use this guy to help jump B-strings against Blacephalon as well, doing 150 to one GX and then 60 to a benched one. Then find double custom catcher, kill 2 Blounds or Blound and Dedenne in a certain turn. Deactivates their B-string for the entire game, and that's just absolutely magnificent. So this Black Lance attack is nuts. It's a reminder of old Night Spear, but this time it's been ramped way up. 150 and 60 is super insane. Sets up damage for the Sableye perfectly as well. 60 means that the 210 from the Sableye does 270. So again, perfect numbers here. The Black Lance really is an amazing attack. And you do have time to do this a lot of games because you have the Dark Moon GX attack for a single colorless. Your opponent simply can't play trainers from their hand during their next turn. Not items, trainers. That means they can't put down supporters and get into new hands. And of course, it also means they can't like Cherish Ball for Dedenne or whatever. So you really do slow them down. A lot of people pass into you when you don't let them play trainers for a turn, and that's amazing. If you do have 5 extra Dark Energy attached to you as well, your opponent's active is knocked out. Again, do not be surprised if you are able to use this. If you don't Dark Moon GX early, using this late is still phenomenal. You knock out a tag team, no questions asked, for 6 energy. You would expect to do that for 6 energy, to be honest. But additionally, doing a trainer lock means you don't get hit with Reset Stamp. And not getting hit with a Stamp is incredible for you to be able to close the game. You've probably just taken 3 prizes all at once thanks to this Dark Moon GX attack. That means you'll have a big hand size to work with to try and dig towards that finishing blow that you need, either with a Sableye or either with this card or finding custom catchers or whatever else it is. You can close the game quite easily if your opponent can't hit you with a Reset Stamp. So this Umbreon Darkrai, I think he's the build around for the deck. I think you'll probably play 1 or 2 Sableye, easily 2 Umbreon Darkrai, and possibly 1 Greninja Zoroark. I think this guy's the selling point. This guy gives you the time. This guy sets up the damage for the Sableye. I think he's excellent, and he's definitely been like the forefront of the deck since we started playing with it. Obviously, Darkrai Prism Star and Naganadel help you build toward that Black Lance, sometimes even on turn 2. Like, if you've gone first, got a Poipole down, and done all that shenanigans with Viridian or whatever, attaching for turn, and then, getting the Weavile out turn 2. It's a dream scenario, but sometimes it does happen, especially when you play a Lily and then you Dedenne. You do see a lot of cards. You see access to these basic Pokemon pretty easily. If you're playing comms as well and treasures for the Poipoles. So, yeah, it's not unrealistic to Black Lance on turn 2, and when that happens, things get pretty scary for the opponent, especially when you have so much hit points to play with. Weavile GX is the all-star of the Dark deck as well. His ability, Shadow Connection, makes things tick. As often as you like during a turn, you may move a basic Dark Energy from one of your Pokemon in play to another of your Pokemon in play. Simple as that. It's Fairy Transfer, but this time it states basic Dark Energy, so we can't get too toolboxy with this guy, fortunately for us. It's just the dark stuff in general, but that's good enough, That's going to be why the Umbreon Darkrai / Sableye deck is going to function. We have Night City as well, which I've already mentioned, so the flexibility of retreating, the flexibility of moving all your energies around is the whole build around for this card. It wouldn't be a thing without him. I'm only giving this a 3-star because I do believe this won't be a tippy top tier archetype. I think there's too many consistency issues because you need to play 2 stage 1s. You need to play the Weavile and you need to play the Naganadel. Now, Naga's easy to search out with Ultra Space or Treasures. Weavile is a GX at the very least, so he's easy to search out. Sneasel's the hardest card for you to find in the entire deck. But once that starts going and you are not getting one shot with your beefy tag teams, you build up these energies and you get a lot of value from this Weavile. It really is insane. His attacks, 130 is enough to get through a non-GX, which is okay, and Night Order in a panic situation can get a number of basics out for you as well, but that's once again, like, if you've only just been able to, like, start a Sneasel, you do, like, a Sneaky Smash to stay alive, then you evolve and Night Order your way out of being donked. That's, like, the only time I'll see this attack being used. We have a Mawile GX onto the Metal stuff. There really isn't much for Metal. It's a 170 hit point GX, weak to fire, so again, alarm bells start ringing. Obviously, your hit points are so low that you get knocked out by pretty much anything anyway. But you have the ability Captivating Wink. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may have your opponent reveal their hand, put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto your opponent's bench. So, this is really bad. You're guaranteeing that you put down a GX Pokemon with low hit points that they can pick off very, very easily, in the hopes that you crumb them at the same time and make them put something down that they happen to have in their hand in that moment. There's obviously the high roll potential of getting the Denes gone and stuff like that, but that's really a small chance oftentimes, and you're guaranteeing that your board gets weaker because you've filled the bench space with Mawile, which really sucks. He does have 2 attacks. Hustle Bite does, for metal colors, 10, 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. That's the whole idea here. You use the Captivating Wink to force them to have Pokemon in play, so your Hustle Bite does the most damage. It reads the same as Mind Jack, of course. And then it has the Big Eater GX attack for metal colorless. Your opponent reveals their hand, discard all supporter cards you find there. So you can see the synergy here. You Captivating Wink, hope that you get rid of their Dedenne. Then you Big Eater, hope you get rid of their supporter cards. That's pretty much the idea. You can try and, you can time Big Eater very well because you can Captivating Wink to always look at your opponent's hand, like a couple times in the game. So the idea is you will catch your opponent out at some point to try and make life difficult for them. But overall, I think that's pretty slow, pretty ambitious, and overall not that good. I've put the Honchkrow on the slide here just because the Big Eater is very similar to Unfair GX. Normally with Unfair GX, you're looking for supporter cards exactly, but obviously Honchkrow's is a lot more versatile. Big Eater being able to take even more supporters out of your opponent's hand in theory if they have 3, I guess. But that's really the only upside of Mawile over Honchkrow. Next up we have Whimsicott onto the Fairy stuff. Again, not too much Fairy stuff here. This is a stage 1 with 80 hit points. It has the Search Out ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may search your deck for any one card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. There's also the free retreat as well. Don't sleep on that because that's a nice pivot if we need it to. I think this will see play exactly in a Porygon build of Whimsicott because you're already going to play like a 4-3 line of Whimsicott GX. Just adding in one of these Whimsicotts for that, search out ability can be nice. It can get you into rare candies. It can get you into Porygon. It can get you into the right Fairy Charm for the right matchup. I think that's reasonable enough. I think you'll play enough Pokemon with the 4-4 Whimsicott, the probably like 3-1-3 Porygon or something like that, and 4 communications. You'll have the opportunity to search out, get yourself into that stage 2, and then start to get rolling. That's the idea of this Whimsicott. I don't see it to be a good enough card outside of a deck that's already playing Whimsicott GX because it's too difficult to search out stage 1s that are non-GXs. It's generally too difficult in general. That's not worth the upside. You would spend those resources doing whatever else you want to do with your deck anyway. Don't fit spaces in your deck for just this Whimsicott unless you're playing the GX already. We move on to Chomp GX. This is like the poster boy of GG End. 270 hit point, tag team, dragon type, weak to fairy. It has the linear attack for a colorless. You do 40 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's pretty nice. It means your opponent can't put down a Ditto Prism Star against you without them getting super punished for a prize card. It also really helps set up damage, as you'll see in a moment, with this Calamitous Slash attack. For Psychic Fighting colorless, you do 160 base, which is already enough to knock out Dedenne, as I should quickly mention. But it has the additional text. If your opponent's active already has any damage counters on it, you do 80 more damage. So the idea is a linear attack gets 40 on there, then you're doing 240 with Calamitous Slash. That means that you can set up tag team knockouts very easily. That's the whole idea of this build. It kind of competes with Ultra Necrozma. That's why I've only given this card a 3-star, because I think it competes unfavorably with Ultra Necrozma for the majority of the time. Your opponent can play around Calamitous Slash by healing. The kind of like upside of Chomp is you do have multiple ways of getting this damage into play. You have linear attack, you have Distortion Door, you have Spell Tag, you have Dragon Talon. You have plenty of options to get Calamitous Slash working for full value, which is kind of like the big upside. And Calamitous Slash for the full value is cheaper than using Ultra Necrozma. You have to at least concede that. So if you're expecting to go through a lot of other tag team decks, Chomp might be the best option there. It does also have a pretty sick GG End GX attack. For Psychic Fighting, you discard one of your opponent's Pokemon and all cards attached to it. So that straight away is really cool. Like, imagine just hitting someone with a reset stamp and removing their best attacker and just putting it into the discard pile. Obviously, you're not taking prizes and going ahead in the game. You'd prefer to Calamitous Slash for a knockout in most situations, especially if you're hitting them with like a reset stamp. But sometimes you don't have the knockout on board. You just GG end instead and hope that the reset stamp makes life just too difficult for them to do anything. That's the whole idea. If your opponents commit 5 energies to something, you can't get through it with a knockout. Instead, just GG end and get your way around it that way. If you do have an additional 3 fighting energy attached, which is going to be very rare, you can discard 2 of your opponent's Pokemon instead. That's really difficult. I don't think it'll happen most of the time. You're probably only going to play like 3 fighting energy anyway, because you're mostly going to play psychic energy, in my opinion. But overall, I think this has been performing worse than Ultra Necrozma for me. But if you're expecting just a heap of tag teams at Worlds, he may be more efficient at knocking them out. So that's something that you should bear in mind. We move on to Dragonite. It's a stage 2, but don't forget that dragons are good at cheating because they have Lance Prism Star and they have Mysterious Treasure. So either good search ability or you can cheat him into play all at once. And he has this Hurricane Charge ability. Once during your turn, you may attach a Water Energy and a Lightning Energy from your hand to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So it reminds me of Vikavolt Strong Charge. Obviously much weaker because it's from hand rather than from deck. But when you're cheating him out, that could be pretty beneficial. So this may be the new energy accelerator that Quagsire has been looking for the entire time. Imagine Quagsire just getting a Wooper knocked out of nowhere on like the first 2 turns, and then a Lance suddenly gets them into Dragonite, and then the other Dragonite, the fast call Dragonite that you can see over here, and suddenly have a nice accelerator for energies whilst also giving yourself fast call for consistency. That could be a really cool trick that some cards do, because Water and Lightning, obviously Lightning in general, like most of the tag teams, they can... Well, Pikarom already has itself as an energy accelerator, and Thunder Mountain and Coco Prism Star. So I care more about the lightning energy that you can accelerate here, because after the loss of Aqua Patch, life is hard for water stuff. Quagsire could really use this with Lance. Also, the Slowduck deck, it can use Misty's Resolve to guarantee... Misty's Request, not Misty's Resolve. Misty's Request to get yourself a Lance very early. And then at any point, if like a Lapras just gets sacrificed or something, you could then Lance into both Dragonites, giving yourself Fast Call as a nice option to get around Reset Stamp, and Hurricane Charge to help accelerate your Slowducks, because they do require 2 energies, and if you're up against 1-hit KO decks, you might need to have that 1 turn of burst of being able to turn attach, and then Dragonite to get yourself rolling with your next tag team. That could be pretty awesome. So overall, if you can abuse Lance, this card could be really awesome as an accelerator. I want to try him out in Quagsire over Naganadel, because I'm just too skeptical that we can get multiple stage 2s out at once. Instead, just try and high roll Lance with like Poke Gears and stuff, and then suddenly things might be okay. Who knows? I want to try it out at least, because this energy acceleration is still good when you can cheat him with Lance. Dragonite GX, I'm giving a 3-star literally for his synergy with Mew and Mewtwo alone. Put him in the discard pile, use Sky Judgment, 270, discard 3 energies for 5 colorless. It's a big 1-hit KO. It's your finisher in Mew Mewtwo. It can knock out an opposing Mew Mewtwo. It can knock out Reshizard. It can knock out Tina Chomp. It can knock out Pikarom. It can knock out anything. I mean, it's just insane. It's like, if you just stack 5 energies on, which we know is easy enough, if you use Full Blitz onto a Mew Mewtwo, if you Psychic Recharge a bunch, if you Welder a bunch, or whatever, there'll be a time in the game where Mew Mewtwo just has that amount of energies attached to it. We can see easily, like, Reshizard was happily able to get 6 energies on it a lot of games. We know that that could happen for Mew and Mewtwo with whatever acceleration that you play, and you just use 270 to win the game. Like, that's pretty much the only credit I'll give to Dragonite, but you know what? He's a game winner, and that's why I'm going to give him a 3-star rating. Also, bear in mind, again, he can cheatsy doodle with Lance. If you want to play 3CE and some other form of energy acceleration, maybe going back to the old Dragonite, if you just have Lightning and Waters in your deck as well as 3CEs, you could try and spam Sky Judgment, which could be pretty cool. I think that's the main way you're going to try and cheat Dragonite, but overall, I think it's copied via a Mew Mewtwo, and Sky Judgment will literally be the way that you shape your opponent's hand because you've knocked out a tag team for game. That's pretty much how I foresee him. So yeah, pretty cool card as a nice 1-hit KO option. We move on to Haxorus. He's a stage 2 dragon type with 150 hit points. Grinder ups the ability. Once during your turn, you may discard a stadium card in play. If you do, attach up to 3 in any combination of fire and metal energy from your hand to this Pokemon. Attaching 3 energies to something is pretty insane. Let's see how he can function. Powerful Axe for a fighting and metal. A fire and metal. Does 10 and 40 more for each basic energy attached to this Pokemon. So all this crazy ability. The synergy with Mount Coronet and Big Oven, where you can use these to get more energies back out of the deck or back from the discard pile, is cool. But at the end of the day, the multiplier is just way too weak on Haxorus. If like I feel powerful Hax has to be like 10 plus 80 to be considered. You know, like to jump through all the hoops of getting Haxorus into play in the first place. Like, man, this deck has to be super clunky. You got to play like 6 stadium cards at least, so you can grind her up a bunch of times. You got to play like Welders, Salazzles. You got to do so much stuff to get this attack going. Like, it's just so below the bar of power. 1 star for sure. We then have a Latias. It's an interesting basic dragon type. It has Energy Arrow. 20 times the amount of energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokeball. So if your opponent's trying to stack up a Mewtwo or a Chomp or Reshizard or whatever, you can just try and get some sneaky damage in there for 1 Psychic Energy. Maybe if you're a baby Malamar deck, or maybe if you're Chomp Mally, where you need to have damage on things on the bench, this could be in here as an annoying non-GX that can just start sniping around some specific Pokemon that start getting energies attached to them. My biggest beef with this card is that it's just not enough damage a lot of the time. It's only good if your opponent has Welder passed or used Recharge a couple times and passed. Even then, just doing a 40 snipe to something, it's not all that cool when that's the main focus of the card. So overall, a little bit too weak for me, but the kind of intention here is that you can Spell Tag and Distortion Door and Shrine a bunch of times. Then maybe when you're missing custom catches, you can just snipe something for a turn or whatever. But overall, I think this is a little bit too weak. Next up, we come to Naganadel GX, one of my favorite cards from the set. I think this card's pretty cool. First thing I do have to say, though, you are not Zoroark. Do not get confused with this card with Zoroark. So many people say, oh, this is the new Zoroark. No, it's super nowhere near that at all. Yes, you're a Dragon type. Yes, you're an Ultra Beast. You're very, very searchable. Thumbs up for that. That's amazing. But your ability Ultra Conversion is nowhere near trade. Think of this much more like a Salazzle, but even worse than Salazzle. Salazzle has Fire Crystal and Big Oven. Naga has Ultra Space, which yes is good, but a lot of the time you need to spend Ultra Space for turn getting attackers into play or getting more basics down or whatever. Every now and then you can use Ultra Conversion, so don't get sold down the river that this card will draw you an insane amount of cards. You have to use him very specifically. However, drawing extra cards in specific situations is still nuts. I really like this card as a one-of in Blacephalon GX. You play 4 Blounds, you play 4 Poipoles, you play 4 Baby Nagas, you play 1 Naga GX and 1 Ditto. Suddenly, on your Beast Ring turn, you get this Naga GX down thanks to Ultra Space, and then you have an extra 3-card dig to get yourself towards Beast Rings. Blounds used to play Persian GX in the previous format. That was when we could search out Pokemon a lot easier with Nest Ball and whatnot. Now it's much more difficult. Just rely on treasures, rely on Ultra Space. You can guarantee this guy down, and then you can find more access to Beast Rings on the turn that you need it. So he gets a big 4-star from me just for his potential in Blounds alone. But there's even more to this card, of course. It has the Venom Shoot attack for Psychic and 3 colorless. You can discard 2 energy from this Pokemon and do 170 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance to the bench. 170 sniping, you can see right there. It's looking for Dedenne the entire time. You can just instantly, no questions asked, snipe Dedenne, which is awesome. Bear in mind as well, Blounds obviously is playing Beast Energy in the deck. So you can even use things like Beast Ring or Welder onto Naga GX. You can attach a Beast Ring for turn, and you can snipe a Dedenne out of nowhere as well. That's sometimes an option that you can go for, especially if Blounds is playing a limited amount of Gust. Right now in my Blounds, I'm only playing custom catches. I'm not playing Ninetales. I don't think there's space for that. So having an additional option to snipe is amazing, especially because Dedenne is the crucial card in the format right now that everyone's playing. You even have the Injection GX attack for a Lightning. You choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, one of your opponent's discard pile cards, and then put it face down as a prize card. So it's very similar to the GX attack of Xurkitree GX, Rumbling Wires, I think it is, or something like that. Yeah, it basically puts your opponent back a turn in theory, which can be nice in random spots. Again, you have Beast Energy to try and work off of that. So I think he's guaranteed in Blacephalon. I think he's better than Persian just because he's much more searchable, and you can easily get value out of him a couple times in the game. And you only really need value out of him a couple times, I think, in my opinion, for those big power spike moments in games trying to dig for Beast Rings. But then there's this whole other build out there, which might be the full-on Beast Box deck, where you play possibly a 4-2-2 split of the Nag GXs and try and go for Beast Raid for the entire game. We saw the NAIC was won by a Zoroark deck that had Stinger in it, and now we could try and have Stinger GX as a much more prevalent archetype. You take away the Zoroarks, and your draw now comes through this Naganadel GX. You try and play a bunch of stack attackers to help out your non-GX matchups. You have weak guard energy, so Naga can tank hits. You have the Lusamine Prism Star turn, which could be very powerful. You have a bunch of these non-GX attackers that can give you type coverage if you want to. The main way I've tried to build the Beast Box deck, though, is just not having any of these Rainbow style attackers. I've just had 3 CEs and weak guards, and then like a Beast Energy and like 2 Psych Energies for the option for Venom Shoot. And I've just had 4 Stackers and 4 Pheromosas of all things. Pheromosa literally just being a free retreater, better than Kartana because it doesn't die to Ultra Necrozma, basically. But you have those. You try and Stinger as quickly as possible, just like the Zoroark deck tried to do a lot of times. And you've already like Beast Raided to hit a tag team, or you've used Venom Shoot to set up damage on a tag team or whatever. You then use the Stinger and then just say, I'm 1 attack away from game. I have the draw engine of Ultra Conversion to dig for custom catchers, and that's going to be my win condition. I think this could end up being the shell of Zoroark that we saw right at the NAIC, where it had Zoro, Persian, and Stinger. Now it's going to be Beast Raid into Stinger into Venom Shoot. Like, that's your 3 attack win condition against tag team decks. I've talked a lot about tag teams and how I think they're very powerful. Mewtwo comes out swinging. Pikarom still seems good. Reshizard still seems good. So having the Stinger option all in one Ultra Beast package makes it much more consistent than the Zoroark build of trying to get exactly Stinger going. Obviously, Zoroark Persian was more consistent in a vacuum at doing whatever you wanted to do. But if you're going down the road of I will Stinger to be my win condition against every tag team deck, I think this is definitely viable. I'm giving this card 4 stars for its Blound potential, but also for the definite opportunity for a Beast Box build to be born out of spamming Stinger when you need to in tag team matchups, and then just trying to squeeze out the game with a combination of Beast Raid and Venom Shoot to close. So yeah, I think he's an amazing card overall. He's just a lot of things in one package. A great sniper of a very important important GX in the game. Good draw potential, and also because he is a Naganadel, that's literally, he reads Naga, so he's easily searchable, and you're already playing thick Poipole line just to have easy access to Stinger. So it ticks so many boxes that he will definitely be a contender for Worlds in my book. We have a Stage 1 Noivern, 120 hit point Dragon type. It has Boom Burst for 1 colorless. You do 20 to each of your opponent's Pokemon. It's Flying Flip, this time on a Stage 1. You even have the free retreat, so it's like the same as Coco in almost every way, but this time you just require 1 colorless. You can try and use Recycle Energy if you want to, which is nice for non-GX spread decks, because one issue of spread decks of old was that you had to keep finding DCE turn by turn by turn. Now you can guarantee Recycle Energy. Obviously, I think you're worried about Mewtwo coming out. They can undo like the entire board of damage if they GX attack through you, so that's a big worry for spread-based decks. And to be honest, I just think Recycle Energy, Dragon Talon, and Shrine aren't enough to get you through the game. I think it's a little bit too slow. Obviously, Tapu Koko's leaving the format, so you don't have that nice like early pressure that you could have had. So I think that's a little bit of a worry. I will also quickly note we have a Dragon Noivern, a Noibat, which is pretty cool for Expanded, so bear that in mind. Now we can DDE onto Noibats and treasure them out and whatnot, so go insane in Expanded with the Noivern GX if you want to. We come to the colorless types, coming towards the end of the episode now, guys. It's taken a long time. But Ordino has the hearing ability once during a turn. If this is your active, you can draw a card. I'm just going to straight up say that this is way worse than Stellar Wish. So as long as we have a skateboard and Stellar Wish, this card will never see play. Drawing 1 compared to almost always getting a card of your choice is far worse. So seeing 5 and almost always taking 1 is better than a guaranteed 1 the entire time. Munchlax is the last card on the set review. It's a 60 hit point free retreating little baby Pokemon that has the ability Feast Search. Once during a turn, you may flip a coin if heads, put a card from your discard pile on top of your deck. Either way, your turn now ends. This has been given 1 star by 63% of the community. I'm pretty much in complete agreement with them, but there's one thing that I will say. If you're going to Worlds and you're worried about the Shedinja deck, you could do one or two things. You can add in Oranguru to resource management back custom catchers, or you can add in Munchlax. Munchlax is a free retreater, so he is, in theory, less of an issue than Oranguru. Like, if you start Oranguru in random matchups, you're like, oh man, I have to find a way of moving him out of the way. You may only play a couple switch cards and whatnot, so life gets awkward for you. Obviously, Oranguru is much better. He gets 2 customs back, no questions asked, and an energy or a switch card or whatever else you want. So, Oranguru, his attack is amazing. That's guaranteed. That's way better against Greninja, and it's way more scary for them. But if you want to just use a Munchlax, you have free retreat, and you can just sit there using Feast Search, flipping until you get more heads for custom catchers, and then just custom catch your way through the game. That's literally all I wanted to say about the Munchlax. The only other note here is that it can be like a pseudo Florgus. Obviously, it's much worse than Florgus because your turn ends heads or tails. So, yeah, he could be like an extra Florgus in the deck if you really wanted to have like one additional one. It also has free retreat. So, I mean, like, that's pretty cool, right? You just have a free retreater in your deck. So, in matchups where he's not going to be useful and you start him, unlike Oranguru, at the very least, you can just, like, no questions asked, move him out of the way and use him when you need to. But don't forget that there are going to be times where you're just like one custom catcher away from game, and sometimes you just send your opponent something and you just pass into them. Instead, like, you can spend your turn using Feast Search instead and be like, oh, if I flip heads, I win the game next turn no matter what. So that could be pretty cool as well. So thumbs up for Munchlax. He should not be ignored as much as all the other baby Pokemon. The rest are absolute trash, but this guy has very, very minor opportunities here, simply because of how important Custom Catcher is in our post-rotation meta, in my opinion. So that is it, guys. I finally made it through. My voice has died a few times. I've had to take a lot of swigs of water, so thank you for bearing with me throughout that. It's been a long one, I can tell already, but at the end of the day, the community and I were actually in agreement this time. I think it's the first time where we've had the same amount of 5-star cards. It's the 4 that you can see here: Cherish Ball, Big Oven, Reset Stamp, and Mewtwo. We were actually all in agreement that we think these cards are absolutely insane, and I think that's pretty true. As always, I try and grade my cards a little bit more harshly than the general consensus. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about the set review. What cards are you excited to start exploring? What cards have you started testing out? How have you tried to build Mewtwo? How are you going to try and build Psyduck and Slowpoke? How are you going to build the Dark deck? I'll hear it all down below. What do you think is the best means of gusting right now? Are you going to try out Alolan Eggs? Man, so many questions for Worlds. It's going to be really exciting. And let me know what you think about Unified Minds. What are your favorite cards? What are you worried about? What do you want to see in the next set? I'll hear it all down below. But thanks so much for watching, guys. It's been a blast. And I need to go sit down and drink a gallon of water. Thank you very much.